окупанти до нас в Україну. Форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Futures
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1016 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we're seeing the Syrian rebels are advancing very quickly on Russian forces and taking key cities. And also, we see that NATO is now considering deploying European forces in Ukraine to create a buffer zone. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've gotten shocking news today that the Russian-aligned Syrian Arab Republic has lost the fourth largest city in Syria in a single 24-hour period, the city of Hama, as SSG forces rapidly advanced into the city's outskirts just 24 hours ago into the northeastern area, and as of today, they have officially taken the entirety of the city of Hama. Syrian Arab Army forces are currently in a rapid retreat further south along the highway and towards the city of Homs. It appears that the situation is so drastic that the Syrian citizens inside of Homs currently are beginning to evacuate even further south and towards the capital city of Damascus, as all faith and hope in the Syrian Arab Army's abilities to stop the tide of rebel forces advancing towards the city of Damascus has largely been lost, and it does appear that the situation is dire at this moment for the Russian-aligned regime. At the exact same time, it appears that the Russian Federation also has no lack really a major lack of confidence in the Syrian Arab Republic as well, as we've been able to hear today that the Russian vessels at Tartus apparently returned to port and have now left again, possibly for the last time ever, as it does appear that the Syrian Arab Army has lost practically all control of the inland areas along the west coast, leaving Russian forces in these areas that have been supporting the Syrian Arab Army in great jeopardy of being surrounded or even captured at their positions, showing that the situation is largely untenable for Russian support in the future. Meanwhile, we've also been able to see that the Russian Air Force has conducted some very rash actions today near the town of Al-Rastan as they have bombed and destroyed the Al-Rastan Bridge over the Orontes River in this area, leaving some Syrian Arab army forces further north on the other side of the river near to the SSG forces and possibly soon to be overrun and captured by the SSG in some very sporadic fighting that may be ensuing as the SSG makes its way towards the third largest city in Syria, the city of Homs. Meanwhile, outside of the Syrian Arab Republic, we have been able to hear that many countries are beginning to consider that an inevitable collapse of Syria may happen here very soon, as we have heard that the state of Israel is declaring that they may end up conducting some form of a sanitary operation to create a buffer zone in between them and rebel forces, and may conduct preemptive battlefield actions to take areas south of the city of Damascus and stop the rebels from being directly along Israel's borders. Meanwhile, outside the Middle East and inside of Korea, we have been able to hear the stirrings of a possible second coup, as we have heard that the president, Yoon Suk-yeol, is apparently declaring a state of alert for the military, and all orders of leave, or shore leave as well, for some of the members of the South Korean Navy, has been suspended, and every single member of the South Korean Armed Forces has to return back to their stations and posts as soon as possible, as it does appear that he will be getting another attempt at a coup, while the National Assembly is already working as quickly as possible towards an impeachment of the president of South Korea. Meanwhile, outside of the drama in South Korea, we have been able to hear some other major news from inside of Ukraine today, as we have heard that the Russian Federation is still desperately on its search for manpower. Manpower is something that is highly talked about, but very little achieved, as it appears that the Russians are once again reaching out to foreign contractors and seeking their involvement in the war. It doesn't really seem as though anyone's really a big fan of that at the moment, and once again, Russian manpower issues are still a major woe of the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, inside of the areas of Ukraine itself and the front lines, we have been able to see that Russian Federation forces have attempted their offensive advances once again for the multiple months in a row that they have been on the offensive, and have once again taken very little ground and fairly significant losses, as we have been able to see on video and picture evidence today. It does not appear that things are going well for the Russian Federation at this moment inside of Ukraine, and it does appear that the Ukrainians are still holding their own defensively, once again putting the Ukrainians into a very decent negotiating position come by the time of next year, although we do believe that the negotiations are most likely going to collapse before they even really begin. But nevertheless, that is really most of the major news topics that we're going to be covering tonight. It is a crazy day in news, I have to say. Yesterday, it was sort of a big day, but not a crazy day. Today is an absolutely crazy day in news, especially with what's going on in the Middle East currently. And we still have loads of other stuff to cover that we have not even mentioned at this point in video and picture evidence. But moving on into the actual news that we have, that is going to be taking us on into the wonderful area of Syria. Oh, Syria. It's an interesting place. Many of y'all know Syria for all kinds of interesting things. Atrocities, massacres against the citizenry, armed dictatorships, wild dictatorships, a group of people called the Assad family who crazily enough thought that they would be able to create a modern-day Assyria and then funded a large amount of terrorist groups in the 1980s that attacked all of their surrounding neighbors trying to make that happen. There was all kinds of crazy things that Syria is known for. But one thing that they've really been known for over the past 12 years is the Syrian Civil War. And the Syrian Civil War is one hell of a conflict. The Syrian Civil War, of course, involves multiple different factions. The Turks, the SSG, the SDF, the SAA, the SFA. All of these different factions that start with the letter S and end with some sort of a version of A or the G letter, depending on if they're possibly from somewhat questionable origins. But nevertheless, we have been able to hear major news today that will most likely be making the books. Many people heard that the Syrian government lost Aleppo a little while ago, and that has largely been something that has kind of come and went because the news got even crazier beyond that point. SSG forces from the area of the city of Idlib began to rapidly advance down the M5 motorway and towards the area of the city of Hama. From what we understand, the city of Hama is the fourth largest city inside of the Syrian Arab Republic. Home to around 1 million people approximately, it is about the same size as the city of Kharkiv inside of Ukraine, which is the second largest city in that country. From what we have heard, the information was a little questionable a little while ago, but we've gotten a much clearer picture now, days later, of what was actually happening. So I'll explain to y'all what we've been seeing so far and what happened today. We were able to see that SSG forces had made it to the area around the town of Syrian, just north of Hama. At that point, the SAA was able to delay the SSG forces just a little bit, but then rapidly lost their defensive positions, as well as a major tank school ground just north of Hama as well, which allowed for the rebels to be able to capture a large amount of Syrian military equipment intact. The SSG forces, the rebels more so, and we'll just call them the rebels to make it a little bit easier, considering that the SSG and the SAA are just, random abbreviations for the large part and kind of sound like that. I'll be saying the Syrians and the rebels from this point forward. The Syrian government was attempting to try and hold on to the city of Hama. The rebels were then advancing from Syrian around towards the east of the city, and then down this motorway right here and into the northeastern suburbs of Hama. This was when we saw that the traffic wardens apparently took major issue to the no parking permits that had been issued to the rebels and decided to take up arms, according to the Syrian government, and defend the city tooth and nail. 24 hours after we heard that, the city then immediately fell to the rebel forces. We didn't really see that much of a fight actually being conducted for the city, as an entire city, 1 million in size, was lost by the Syrian government in a single day. This is by no measure a small city, and I want to make that a little bit more clear, because with the way the city fell and how quickly it was given up, one would largely assume that it had to have been a smaller city. But the city of Hama, if we were talking in Ukrainian terms, is one of the largest cities out there at the moment. And to make sure that we get you all the exact statistic here, there is 996,000 people living in the city of Hama. It's one of the oldest cities in this area of the world, interestingly enough, along with Aleppo. And another thing that's also really interesting as well, just to show you all this, is that the city of Kharkiv, which has been known famously in Ukraine, considering that it was a major battlefield during the earlier part of 2022, and hasn't really been since that point, it has a population of 1.4 million, meaning that it's only a little bit larger than Hama. Hama and Aleppo are pretty much just a little bit below and a little bit above Kharkiv in population number, and giving y'all a real idea of size and scale of a city like Hama. That's what makes it even more shocking that the city fell that quickly to rebel forces. Generally, cities like these end up being an unmitigated hell, at least in a peer-on-peer conflict, as it's largely impossible to make any rapid ground because every single house is a battlefield in itself. There is no such thing as wide-sweeping battles across multiple city blocks where you're able to make rapid advances. There are loads of places that defending forces can hide, and there are loads of areas that attacking forces have to clear to be able to move forward. This usually means that urban fighting takes far longer than any kind of countryside fighting, and that's usually why you see that the cities in the Ukraine war are usually where the battles last the longest, because defensively they are superior defensive positions compared to the countryside, and offensively they are in unmitigated hell and really a large defender's advantage and being able to try and protect a city. This is why, and this is really the whole crux of the thing, it's shocking to see that the city fell in 24 hours. This was a significant city, and there are loads of defensive elements inside of the city of Hama that could have been used to the advantage of the defending Syrian Arab army forces. There is a major riverway that passes through the middle of the city, which should have made it actually fairly easy to at least hold the southern side of Hama, at least according to what we understand for the SAA. But that didn't appear to really help them out at all. In fact, the battle has passed so quickly, we really don't have a lot or any information for that matter about how the Battle of Hama actually unfolded. It looks as though the Syrian Arab army may have ended up getting into contact and completely routing after that and just leaving the city pretty much without a fight. That's kind of what we're understanding at the moment, and this is leading us into a very interesting picture or an analysis that the Syrian Arab army may actually be cooked. They have been fighting a war for 12 years, and they're about to lose the entire conflict in roughly 12 days. It's pretty much the exact inverse of the Russian war in Ukraine, where they're supposed to win it in 3 days, and now it's been 3 years. They were supposed to fight the war for 12 years, and now they're losing it in 12 days. But moving on into some of of the footage, we were able to see the rebels showing at least one of the streets in Hama today and showing us what it looked like, or at least a little bit of what it was. And here's the clip.
Allahu Akbar. داتقينها شغالة.
We're, of course, starting it off with the traditional.
Allahu Akbar.
But we can see it destroyed the Syrian Arab Army Shilka.
It looks like pure hell in here too, like a twister came through.
It really does, honestly. Oh, you see another abandoned Syrian Arab Army tank over there in the distance. And we hear some gunfights. It appears that the cameraman has been ambushed.
Damn, son. Oh, look at that guy's thing. Bro went straight to the movie-style ambush. That was a bad move.
That was a pretty bad move. We can see that he's firing off the vehicle as they try and make their way out. And they are going as fast as they can to try and get out of there. This video was actually, interesting enough, filmed by the rebels, and this appears to be one of the few times we ever saw the Syrian Arab Army engage in a firefight with rebel forces. Was literally just this one clip. It appears at the moment, though...
Yeah, I would say pretty much so far. So far, it seems like they've been relatively not fighting that much. It seems like they've been pretty much just taking stuff, and the Syrians run off, and also the Russians are running off, so kind of unusual to see one on camera. And sure enough, the first one we see on camera is some goofy guy getting ambushed here, so very interesting.
It is really interesting, and we were also able to see some other clips showing that just a little bit later on in the day, the Syrian Arab Army was already largely in full retreat. Now, I have to mute the music because these songs are, interestingly enough, copyrighted. I don't know who wants to have the misfortune of owning those copyrights, but we can see here the Syrian Arab Army quite literally getting in pickup trucks and running for their lives out of the area. We can also see another Syrian Arab Army convoy right here made up of a tank and a couple of APCs as they are trying to desperately leave the area of the city. We now see they're cutting through the open country fields. Once again, trying to...
That thing's like freaking on the loose, man. It's got the trunk going up and down on the front of it. Look at it.
Man, trunk? Like, what is this, an elephant?
Yeah, it was like rolling through there like an elephant. The trunk was going... Go back and look at it.
I did see it. Like, I don't think they have the gun locked in, honestly, which is a bit of an issue. Look at that.
Look at that.
Oh,
that's
crap.
crazy.
Man, I think I pulled a muscle in my neck right there laughing at that one. But we can see it getting on the road and going crazy.
Chased him down like like one of those horror movies with those semi-trucks chasing down that dude in the minivan.
Yeah, man, that was crazy. And you see them continuing to advance down the road, firing on Syrian Arab Army forces. Apparently, this is actually a convoy of the SSG. Actually, hold up. I don't know who's who here, honestly. And what is this? I have no clue.
Whoa, what the? It's just an out-of-control lunatic.
Oh!
Oh my god, he's wrecking. What the hell was that?
Oh my god, and they ran him over.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
They ran him over.
Oh my god, and then they ran over each other. Oh my god.
What the hell was that? What even was that for real, though? What happened?
I have no idea. Interestingly enough, I want to put this out there. I'm not really sure if this is Hebrew or if this is Arabic. It honestly looks like Hebrew to me of a specific text font. So I don't know who actually published this video, but I'm not sure who's who. I'm not really sure if the armored convoy is the Syrian Arab Army. I'm not really sure if they're red or the rebels. I can't really tell. I'll be honest with y'all. So the convoy gets on.
Todd lobby out here, man. What is this? That dude driving up in that truck just then, like that was like the craziest thing I've ever seen. I don't even understand what was going on. Like even like I don't who like if it was the enemy or the friendly people, who the hell would do that?
I don't even know. I have no clue. This is wild, though. So let's watch this again. So the tank is rolling up there, firing. We see some guys running through the fields. Here comes the rest of the APCs and BMPs. And then here comes this.
Here he comes.
Now here comes the Toyota Tacoma. Now, I'm very interested. I'm seeing some people saying that is Arabic. Well, thank you. No reason to shout, though. But I don't really know if that is the SSG or the SAA right there. But we can see them firing with a machine gun. The truck then rips by the entire column at Mach, like, 9, to put it in a light way, a PG way, and then flips out of control, slams into a berm. The guys are trying to get out of the truck and run out. The BMP runs over it, and then the second BMP also runs over it and then hits the other BMP as well, possibly crushing people who were getting out of the BMP. There's now dirt flying around everywhere as we're watching them pass the pickup.
Dang. Dude, that truck got purely flattened. I would assume that's the enemy. Oh, damn. He just
What the
ran
hell?
with some stuff there as well. You
Oh
saw
my
that? There was
God.
personnel standing in front of that tank.
So here comes another pickup. There's another one. And they go off-road.
Some attempt to, like an ambush attack or something? Like, I guess?
I have no idea, but look at these people. Oh my God.
Stupid. I almost took down that cedar. Luckily, it wasn't hurt.
That is crazy. Now, that is Arabic right there, without a doubt. But nevertheless, it is a really weird thing to see because, unfortunately, y'all, I cannot tell y'all who's the SSA and the SSG. So I have no idea who is who in this clip. But this is absolutely Mad Max out there at the moment. There's really no way to go about that. I mean, people are literally flipping trucks over berms while they're on the back with a heavy machine gun. Look at this. Like, this is crazy.
Man, like, honestly, the fighting going on in Syria, like, I'm not personally rooting for any side in particular. They're all kind of bad, but we obviously are for the people getting Assad out of there, at least temporarily. But what the hell is, like, the fighting style here? Like, I think between Assad's army and the rebels, they're on an even playing field, but it's like a freaking, like, chaotic COD lobby out here. There's no, like, rhyme or reason to anything. It's just, like, throw crap at the wall and see what sticks, and that's what we're seeing. That guy jumping over the berm was insane, too.
The Syrian civil war is a war of the people, by the people, for the people, but the people are stupid. Like, it's like that's the entire war, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's no training involved in any of this. Like, let's just watch the whole clip one more time, at least this part right here. So here comes our first Tacoma, again, as y'all saw. This guy has no control of the recoil, so he misses every single shot, of course. So the truck goes racing by, and then it tried to pit maneuver a BMP. Like, I want to go back and watch that again. So it tried to pit maneuver the BMP right here, as y'all can see, because he actually tried to get the front of the hood onto the back of the BMP. And while BMPs are not tanks, and they are lighter than a tank, the pickup ain't pit maneuvering in a BMP. That's just not happening. So then it goes out of control, flips into the berm, slams into it, by the way, at about 30 miles an hour. And so then the first BMP, they're like, well, what would be a good idea? We could take these guys prisoners. No, we'll run them over. So they run over the truck. And then some other guys are shooting into the air like they're cowboys from a Wild West movie, like they're John Wayne out here. Look at this, Matthew. Like, watch.
Yeah, they sure are.
That guy didn't fire towards them. The powder is going up. Like, he just fired into the air. And so then we can see the other BMP run over the truck. Okay, let's watch this. It runs over the truck, and then it flips up, and then it smacks off the back of the other BMP, possibly wounding people inside that one. These guys are allies. And then goes flying into the road over here, flipping that other BMP, looking directly towards the rebels that ran into the field. Now we can see a clip of something smoking on the vehicle as they now fly over the truck. Guys are just sitting all abound. You know, they're very confused. And then some of them start to run. So what do? They run like the school of Prometheus of running away from things in front of the BMP instead of to the sides. And then they just keep running in a straight line. One of them gets mowed down. That BMP then runs into a brick wall, ending that entire BMP's lifespan, most likely, probably ruining the front transmission in the vehicle. And then the other one comes up, and so then they're like, we have a genius plan. We're just going to take a hard right and pray. And it looks like, inshallah, the praying did not work. As one of them got flight miles, it hit a tree. Actually took the tree down, it hit it hard enough somehow. And
I'm just saying, but it seems like the smart thing to do for this group right here, trying to do this sneak attack, like on the convoy right here, was probably to go like get in position way far ahead of the convoy, set up an ambush of their own there, like stationary, and wait for the convoy to arrive instead of like flying up behind them, like just yeeting the approach. Like, I'm not sure if that was the best way to do it. But you know, they lived well. They didn't live or learn actually, so it's just a waste.
it was honestly a waste. I believe, Matthew, that OSHA would have an issue with this. I'm sure that there's a violation in here somewhere of workplace safety. I'm very certain. But also, this truck flipped over. Now, just straight over on the side. And a lot of people would say, now, I always hear people say this, you know, and it's always those sage people who know everything. They always say, video games are not what war is like, or war is not a video game. Now, I have to challenge that. It appears that the Syrian Civil War, quite literally the best training everyone has in the Syrian Civil War is a COD lobby, or maybe PUBG or Battlefield. There's no way in hell these people have real training. We've been watching the Ukrainians and the Russians duke it out, and while they don't have exactly Western levels of training, Ukrainians do fairly good, but they don't really have Western levels of training, which is pretty much the peak. The Syrians, I don't know what they have, but it's nothing. Like, they have no training, no vision, no mindset, no freaking passion. Like, they got none of it. It looks sad out here. And this really does look like a video game. So, I gotta say, very, very crazy stuff. Very good. Let me read the title on this thing, just to see. Okay, Syrian army troops are attacked by Syrian rebel BMP-1s and T-72s. So, the guys in the pickups were actually the Syrian army.
Yeah, that was Assad's army going up on the BMPs. That was the most ridiculous thing. Honestly, I thought that was the rebels for a minute. I was like, that seems like something maybe a rebel force might be doing, but that was the actual Syrian army. Or wait a minute, was it, or am I reading that wrong?
No. The guys in the pickup trucks were the Syrian army. The guys in the armored vehicles were the rebels.
Okay, so it was. That's just crazy, man. Like, I would not expect that from them, but that's just insane.
I gotta tell you, man, I've never seen anything like this. Like, I want to watch it over and over again because it is crazy to witness this and just see what happened. Like, it's the weirdest thing ever, man, when you think about it. Like, this is what it looked like. That's why it's really hard for me to tell y'all what even happened in the city, because I'm guessing if we got footage from the city, it would look like this. Like, people just standing in the street like Rambo firing a machine gun from the hip, maybe running from building to building, like literally just spraying anyone in them. Like, I don't know what's going on in Hama. Like, it fell, we know that, but we don't know how it actually went. And considering how it went on the flanks of the city out in the fields, I'm assuming that the actual fighting inside the city was just so chaotic that it was pretty much a battle of the wits, I suppose, rather than anything else, and the Syrian Arab army just gave up. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we were able to see some more Syrian Arab army forces getting hit pretty hard. Now, this is what you call grouping. My heavens, look at this, Matthew. There is no grouping down there. Every single one of those white specks is a Syrian Arab army soldier.
Even the Russian military with their two group. This is taking it to the extreme. This is like 50 group. This is called one shot takes out your entire unit type group.
Man, this isn't 2 group or 3 group. This is company fallen. Like, this is that kind of a group. It's like, oh my God. And we see them dropping a bomblet. And the bomblet's going to explode any second now. Oh my Lord, and they got a score of them. Oh my God. Like, oh my God. This is chaos. I'm like, I gotta laugh at this one, folks, because I've never seen a war fought like this before in my life. Like, I knew that the Syrians were on either side were not top notch, but this is like top notch idiots here or something like that. I've never seen anything like this before. There goes another score of them. So with 2 drone bomblets, they wiped out about an entire Syrian platoon. So I think y'all can get the idea why the Syrian Arab army is losing, because the rebels are getting the most bang for their buck at the moment they can. This is wild. This is absolutely crazy. But we did get to see that the rebels did take the city of Hama today, which is the 4th largest city. This statue right here is at the very southern side of Hama, and this is actually a statue of Hafez al-Assad, who was the father of Bashar al-Assad, and a pretty brutal dictator at that as well.
Oh, snack bar.
Oh!
He's down for the count.
Celebratory gunfire as usual. Not safe, but that's what they do, I suppose.
Pray for little Timmy. Their lives are in danger.
Also, I gotta say this, man, I'm kind of shocked, considering everything we saw with how the battle went, that no one got crushed by the statue falling backwards. I'm just saying, like, I was expecting that somewhere. I was expecting a Live Leak logo, but it looks as though everyone was out of the way. Also, what's interesting is that the statue got decapitated when it hit the back concrete blockade. It got decapitated, so I guess that's kind of symbolic, I suppose, maybe. But beyond that, We can, see them cheering. I like how they look up into the sky, Matthew, and it's like Odessa at night under a Russian drone attack, and there's literally nothing going on up there.
Yeah.
Like, and
You would
everyone's
think they would
outside.
save their ammunition, because if they would save their ammunition, they might be able to like use that maybe in the future when they make their way down toward Homs, maybe. But I guess they're just going to waste it here on Celebration. Also, it looks like maybe they're using tracers or something, so even worse.
Dude, you know what's funny, man, is that the reason why they probably started using the BMPs to try and run folks over in the last clip is because they were like, shoot him, click, 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 we're out of ammo, we shot it all celebrating the capture of Aleppo, damn it, run him over, and then they ran him over instead. That's probably why, because they don't have ammo, they're just shooting it into the air every chance they get. These people have, like, these folks in the rebel forces and the Syrian Arab Army have absolutely no training. Like, it's insane to see this. Like, they actually make the Russians look hardcore professional. Like, it's crazy to see that happen. But these people, the rebels, the government, they're all pretty bad off. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in the entire time of covering news, and it's hard to be giving a good analysis off of that because it's so chaotic, anything can happen. But anyways, moving on from that, we were able to see that then after we saw the Syrian Arab Army was grouping up in the streets and getting hit by drone bomblets and loads of people were getting wiped out, you would think that lessons would be learned by the rebels in going, hey, let's all not like group up on a highway in the hundreds so that we don't end up getting wiped out by a single bomb or a single shell. And then the rebels actually piled up on the highway in the hundreds, literally bumper to bumper, as they got ready to drive in unison down to the city of Homs, which is the next city that's going to most likely fall to the rebels. But here's the clip.
ما شاء الله ما شاء الله هيا رجال حماس.
And that's the end of the clip.
No, that was a pretty nice car just driving through the midst of all that right there. That was like, you go back and let's see what kind of car it was. I'm curious.
Let's see here. Also, I like this guy up here who's just like sitting there. He's like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, he's just sitting there. He's just, I don't know, man.
ما شاء الله هيا رجال حماس.
Huh, that looks like a Mercedes.
It looks like maybe a Ford Fusion or something.
Oh.
Maybe. I'm not really sure. No, I don't think that's a Mercedes. I think that might have been like a Ford Fusion or a Hyundai. I was curious, though, just to see.
I'm kind of blind, honestly, but still, that's a little wild. They're already getting ready to move down to Hama. And most importantly, I do have to let y'all know, before we get into this very interesting question we've asked y'all about Homs, it appears that many people have apparently heard on the radio in Homs, Matthew, attention all towns and cities, calling all towns and cities, beware, you better lock up your doors today, because Abu Hassan...
They're riding through.
Man, they honestly literally just are. But it appears that people are already beginning to flee the city of Homs as they try and make their way out towards Damascus.
هاي مقابل كلية الطب. هاي مشفى الجامعة.
I wonder where they're trying to flee to. Like you said Damascus is where they're trying to go?
Apparently so.
Huh, seems like an odd place to go, because that's where the rebels are heading next.
Well, maybe they're just wanting to get there for the big party that'll be thrown, and all the gunfire in the air and the generally unsafe conditions. But we also saw that the Russians appear to be lacking faith as well in the Syrian Arab Army, as they are now blowing up major bridges on the M5, including this one near to the town of, let me make sure that I got the name correct. Let's see here. The town of Rastan. I believe it's Al Rastan, right? Let's see here. Right here. Rastan. And this is the bridge that they actually hit right here. That's the one. And you can actually see its outline in the explosion right about, let's see here. Where was it? Oh, come on. Bam. There we go. Now let's rewind it all the way to the beginning. Boom. And you can actually see the outline of the bridge in a couple of the frames, showing that the Russians are bombing this bridge and wiping it out so that it cannot be used by the rebels to quickly cross the valley and get towards the city of Homs. It appears that the Syrian Arab Army is literally in a rout at the moment and most likely will not be able to survive that much longer given the kind of current conditions that they're in and how rapidly these major cities are beginning to fall. It even appears that the Russians are losing complete faith in the Syrians and chalking it up to a lost cause, as the Russian Navy fleet that was in Tartus has apparently withdrawn, probably for the last time. We have been able to hear of them leaving the port a couple of days ago. It appears that they may return to refuel, and now they are homeless at this moment, traveling around the areas of the Eastern Mediterranean with really nowhere to go and nothing to do. It seems as though the city of Homs' fate has already been written on the wall, as it appears that the rebel forces will most likely take the city And many people are actually believing that with the city of Homs falling, we will most likely see that the Syrian government may actually collapse as well. But it does appear that Syrian rebels are en route to Homs, which is the third largest city, as citizens flee amidst the Russian troops as well. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And it seems as though many people do not have confidence in the Russian-aligned Syrian government or the Syrian Arab army, and they do believe that the city will fall rapidly. But Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so we do see that the rebels are making the way through Syria extremely quickly, and now they are indeed en route to Homs, which is the third largest city. And also, the citizens are fleeing, like you saw in the video, and the Russian troops are also attempting to flee as well. So overall, it's not going good. So 75% said Homs will fall very quickly, while 2% said they will never make it there, meaning the rebels will never make it, and 12% said Homs will be a challenge to take. And typically, like the enforcer also mentioned as well, urban fighting is usually difficult, but when you have an enemy that's running off and also basically in a route away from the city, that makes things a lot easier. So it looks like the Russians and the Assad army is largely taking off. There will be some staying behind that are, I guess, quote unquote, brave or stupid, one or the other, and they will be fighting with the rebels. But I think Homs will fall very quickly. It's not going to be a long process at all. So I'm definitely with the 75%. And after Homs, they're looking at Damascus, that is. So getting down there to the big city, that is. But Enforcer, what say you?
They're getting to the big boy. And I would have to assume that the city of Homs will most likely fall very quickly. The fact that Aleppo collapsed as quick as it did was really a major indicator that any city that's smaller than Aleppo would most likely also collapse rapidly as well. And the city of Hama, and the fact that the battle only lasted a day and it appears that the city has already been taken, is clearly showing us that the rebels have the, I guess, more so the morale, if we want to put it that way, to advance. I mean, they certainly sure as hell don't have the training. Neither do the Syrian Arab army forces either, but I guess they have the morale to beat out the Syrian Arab army, and it already looks like they're making their way towards Homs at the moment. And so I would assume that a lot of folks in Homs are about to be without a home, as the rebels will most likely be taking the city very quickly once they actually make it to the city's outskirts. It appears that the attempt at mobilizing the traffic wardens of Hama didn't really work either, as it appears that they have found citations to issue elsewhere, outside the city limits of the city of Hama. So going off of that, I'm assuming that they probably will be taking the city of Homs, and at that point, Damascus will quite literally be the only thing left that is actually of any significant importance that is still within the Assad regime's control, practically meaning that they have lost the civil war. Let me go really quickly and see if the map has been updated on Wikipedia at the moment for the Syrian civil war. Yeah, it's been updated a little bit. So here's the map that that Wikipedia is showing as far as what's going on in the area. And you can see that this massive area here in white is what's under the control of the SSG, which is the Syrian Salvation Government. And then we see that the Turkish-backed forces have been advancing through the Aleppo area. And we can also see as well, really quickly, to try and figure out what else we have on this map. There's apparently some uprisings in the area around the Israeli border, possibly, and also this area that's dashed with gray lines. I don't actually know what that means. Oh, wait a minute, what? No way. They're coming back? Dude, did you see that? I cannot show it on screen for long, but this group right here, right there, you see that?
Oh, okay, that one's coming back. Wait a minute, they're coming back as of when?
Apparently now, because I've never seen this on the map before, at least the dashed areas. I mean, we literally looked at this yesterday, and we did not see any of it. And it appears that they are controlling a pretty decent amount of SSG, Syrian government, and SDF territory at the moment. Well, not really controlling it, but at least their presence is maybe being seen in that area, according to the map on Wikipedia.
Well, that's honestly not good at all, because I'm not sure if maybe they've moved into the area or maybe they were already there and were simply dormant and they activated their sleeper cells, if you can call it that. But that's not good, because with that group that we cannot name on stream showing up and the rebels taking over Syria, I'm not sure if I'm jumping the gun here, but that could mean we see some infighting happening between these rebel groups and also maybe that group, perhaps in the future.
Yeah, that's a little bit interesting, I'm not going to lie. It's a little concerning, actually. But one thing that can be said, though, one thing that we can say somewhat well, is that I believe that the Syrian government is cooked at this point. I do believe, folks, that Chad is truly cooked. Also, Yeah, so the little areas down here that are in purple, those are actually opposition groups. So they're already popping up all over the place south of Damascus. They're losing everything north of Homs, and it appears that they may be losing Homs soon. So at that point, the only cluster of settlements that they control is directly around Damascus, and that's about it. The coastline is most likely going to be taken by the SSG here in the future once they capture Homs, because those forces will pretty much be besieged at that point. There's no way for the Syrians to support them or supply them to keep them fighting in that area, so they'll pretty much be lost instantaneously. It also appears that the SDF really is not advancing at all, which is a little weird, to be entirely honest, because considering that the Syrian government is being shown to be this weak, you would think that the SDF would also be taking advantage of the situation and trying to race through the desert to make it to Damascus first, at least to take some major population areas, but it doesn't really seem that they're doing that at the moment. So overall, this is a little weird and kind of interesting, at least according to this map. And also, really quickly, let me see if I can get y'all a little look at the Syrian civil war time lapse, at least with who's controlled what over time. So, let's see here. Timeline of the Syrian civil war. Do we actually have a map of this, though? Hang on here. So, yes. I see. So, this actually appears to be something that's been put on Wikipedia, which shows a historic time lapse of what has been in Syrian government control and what has not been in Syrian government control. And of course, it's showing all of the different forces that are getting involved and are operating in the area. But one can always note that the Syrian government had control of Aleppo pretty much most of the time, as well as Hama, Homs, and Damascus. And while there may have been some rebel forces in between the areas, they never actually lost those cities. But as we are seeing here over time, it appears that the only time that they've lost Aleppo, Hama, or Homs will be right now. So this is the first time in the Civil War's history that the central government, the Assad-aligned government, has completely lost the major cities, which is a little wild when you think about that.
It is wild. And also, what's more wild to me is that one group starting with an I showing back up there. And also, if they've already been there, I'm imagining they probably will rear their heads up a little bit more. I'm not sure what faction or branch of that group starting with an I is, because obviously there's worse factions than others. But honestly, this is probably why we'll never really see like true peace in the Middle East. There's so many factions that show up. Like when one starts taking over, for example, you think it's a good thing the Assad regime is going to get put out by these rebels. But then if the rebels take over, and then all of a sudden a stronger faction shows up, like the group starting with an I, and they start fighting with the rebels, well, you could have a much worse situation on your hand than you had with the Assad regime, depending on who takes charge of it and who gets a hold of all that equipment and all of that power in these cities right here. So it's just a tricky situation. Like, hopefully it doesn't end up worse than it was with Assad, because there is a possibility it could get worse.
Hopefully it will not get worse, but I'm assuming at the moment, no matter how this is going, things are not going to be ending up peachy. That's fairly clear at the moment, because it looks as though Syria is not only, the Syrian Assad-aligned government is not only losing control, the country and most of the factions involved right now also appear to possibly be imploding as well. So that might not be a good thing. It might have to actually require a lot of foreign intervention in Syria to try and get a more controllable situation going, because this may actually end up turning out worse than it was beforehand. But nevertheless, moving on from that, we did hear that the Israelis are concerned, at least with the popping up of a large amount of opposition forces along the border and possible conflict bleeding over into the area of the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights. It seems as though the Israeli government is speaking about creating a buffer zone to secure the southern areas of Syria. At least that's what we've been told by Israeli officials today. And Israeli officials have reportedly told the United States and regional allies that they will launch a ground operation into southwestern Syria to establish a buffer zone if rebel forces manage to capture the city of Homs. And so it does show that not only will the Syrian Arab army be fighting the rebels and all of the different factions involved in that, they will also be fighting the Israelis as well if they end up losing the city of Homs, largely putting a death nail into the Syrian Arab Republic and probably leading to the end of the Assad regime entirely. But a lot of people have also been asking about that as well, saying that maybe it is something that the Israelis should do, or maybe the Israelis shouldn't do that. There have been many questions and many statements made about this. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so based on what we're hearing from Israeli officials, Israel is seriously giving thought to invading southwest Syria to create a buffer zone against the rebels if more cities start falling. For example, Homs, if it falls, then Israel is strongly considering going into Syria to create that buffer zone. So what are your thoughts? 50% of the audience said Israel should go for it, while 34% said Israel should not do that, and 5% said it's really not that important. And I'll be honest, at first glance, when I heard this earlier today, I was thinking that Israel might be overstepping just a bit because Israel is getting a little bit overextended, and also they seem to be going into several different countries and invading on the premise of creating buffer zones, and it seems not to be really panning out. But I will say, considering the news that those dormant cells inside of Syria, of that group starting with an I, might have resurged and might be coming back, it actually might be wise for Israel to maybe think about this. Or otherwise, they could have a really, really bad group right there on their border. So that would be a very bad thing. So they might have to create that buffer zone if that intel is indeed true. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, the Israelis, and this is a little bit of a tough one to be entirely honest with you all, because technically the Israelis already have a buffer zone because they've been controlling the Golan Heights since about 1973 at this point. So I don't really know if they need another border zone or another buffer zone because they already have a pretty significant one in the Golan Heights. Still, considering that they technically have a border area, there is something more serious to consider, that if the Israelis are able to stabilize at least southwestern Syria, that cuts that out of the power plays that are going to be conducted in the future against the warring factions that will continue on inside of Syria. So with that in mind, I think it would be good for them to create a buffer zone if they want to, but not really because of safety reasons or anything along those lines, because they already have the Golan Heights. It's really just to make sure to kick that out of the playing field for the rest of the conflict, and then allow other factions supported by other nations, most likely like the SDF, to be able to try and battle its way into the complete control of Syria at some point in the future. That's what I would say, at least at the moment. And also, Vano says, the Golan Heights isn't a buffer zone. Well, it's not Israeli, so what is it? I mean, yes, it is currently controlled by the Israelis, but technically that's a part of the Syrian Arab Republic, not Israel. It's just happened to be a part of Israel because they've occupied it for about 50 years or so. And that's something that a lot of people do not know. And let me go see really quickly if I can go pull that up. The Golan Heights occupation. Let's see. Here we go. So this is just a quick answer right here. Since the Six-Day War of 1967, the western two-thirds of the Golan Heights has been occupied and administered by Israel, whereas the eastern third remains under the control of the Syrian Arab Republic. Following the war, Syria dismissed any negotiations with Israel as a part of the Khartoum Resolution at the 1967 Arab League Summit. So going off of that, this area is currently occupied and administered by the Israelis, almost in an occupational form of governance. That's why this area exists on the map with squiggled lines and not solid lines defining actually internationally recognized borders. So technically, this is pretty much a buffer zone because it is extending Israel's borders a pretty significant bit, actually. Let me make sure to measure this here. About an additional 14 miles into Syria itself already, and it was actually a pretty significant tank battle as well, one of the biggest of the later end of the 20th century, which is pretty cool. But beyond that, it kind of technically is a buffer zone already at that point, considering that that's technically legally a part of the Syrian Arab Republic. So with that in mind, I would say buffer zone, they already technically have one with the Golan Heights, but I would extend it anyways because it could only benefit the West a little bit if this area is put under Israeli control, because the Israelis have a pretty good gist of counterinsurgency operations and will be able to largely root out counterinsurgency in this area and bring it into a more stable form of control, at least temporarily, until the situation can be stabilized in the rest of Syria. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion at this point, with what the Israelis should do, because I don't really think it could hurt much of anything if they were to do something like that at this point. But moving on from that and out of Syria, it is now time for us to move on into South Korea, as we have been able to hear some very interesting things in South Korea today, as it does appear that another possible coup may be coming down the line here anytime soon, as the leader of Yoon's political party, Han Dong-hoon, has called for the immediate suspension of Yoon's official duties, and he stated that I have confirmed through reliable channels that President Yoon Suk-yeol instructed Yo In-hyung, the counterintelligence commander, to arrest key political figures on Tuesday night under the pretext of them being anti-state forces. And we also were able to hear some additional information that we had on our Twitter page as well, that apparently CNN was told that 1/3 of the parties in South Korea, the opposition, are currently staying inside the National Assembly building right now at all times in case if President Yoon declares martial law again. And we've also been able to hear that there's been some other interesting news, as it does appear that the South Korean military, at least according to other posts that we were able to get about an hour ago at this point, which was right at the start of the stream, may actually be trying to conduct another attempt at a coup before an impeachment can be moved against President Yoon Suk Yeol. It does appear that the situation in South Korea, at least on the political level, is still unstable, and it seems as though there may be a large question as to where the military leans at this point, considering that the government is fractured.
Also, by the way, Enforcer, it is currently 1 a.m. over there in South Korea right now, and considering they're saying that emergency meeting will convene at 11:30 a.m., we will know very soon exactly what is going to happen with this. This is not going to be drawn out very long, and also, I was reading here to figure out what that emergency meeting was actually going to consist of. I'm not sure if that's actually the emergency meeting to decide whether or not he's going to get impeached, because it looks like the impeachment vote is set for December the 8th, and today's December the 5th. So I'm really not sure what that emergency meeting is about. Maybe they're trying to advance the impeachment vote, like to maybe an earlier date. But considering they're doing this, we'll probably hear something in the next 10 hours or so as to whether or not there's going to be another attempt at martial law.
I believe that's a pretty good assessment at the moment. This situation is one that I'm trying to not pay attention to too much and get too much into the weeds, because it's very tough to explain it without getting into South Korean politics. But Matthew largely is dead on the nail with that analysis there, in case if y'all are taking notes. Also, I saw someone say this, Matthew. I want to address this really quickly. Someone said, internationally recognized or not, to the victor goes the spoils. Is that really the case, though? Because it seems as though a lot of people are not saying the same thing with Ukraine, you included, and that's not something I'm a big fan of. Internationally recognized borders are internationally recognized borders. If a country is to occupy an area, it's an occupation. There's no reason in wanting to move that forward into going, well, it's a part of Israel now, because it's not. It's technically an occupied zone of the Syrian Arab Republic and has been since 1967. So that is not a part of Israel, and that's not really the case. To the victor goes the spoils, because according to modern international law, national borders are supposed to be respected by every nation. That's kind of the issue with Ukraine that a lot of people have, is that Russia didn't respect their borders, yet I don't really see many people saying the same thing when it comes to Ukraine. To the victors go the spoils, because if so, then that means the Russians rightfully occupy about 20% of Ukraine at this point, and no one should be complaining about that. Me personally, I find something to complain about with that, not only because it's not in our interest for the Russians to control the specific areas of Ukraine that they do, but it's also a violation of international law as well. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. As far as the situation, though, in the Golan Heights, that was an official war that was created, actually, interesting enough, I believe, if I'm correct, by the Arab League, and the Israelis responded and conducted a counteroffensive into the Golan Heights. Peace treaties were attempted and failed, and so they just ended up occupying the territory well into the present day. So by technicality, there really is nothing illegal about the Israelis occupying the Golan Heights at the moment, because they did everything within a legal framework to get to that point. But still, at the same time, international borders are to be respected in situations where they should be. So instead of saying this is Israeli and, they won fair and square, because that's not the metric we work on Ukraine, and that's therefore not the metric we work on anywhere, this is a technical military occupation of southwestern Syria already by the Israelis, but largely that is considered fine, because they did it within the frameworks of a larger conflict in a defensive form, and they have still maintained control of it, because the Syrian government has been petty enough to not actually enter peace negotiations to have this land returned to them, regardless of what the Israelis have tried to do in the past with that. But with that, I hope that does kind of cover that, at least sufficiently. But moving on from that and out of South Korea, it is now time for us to finally get on into Ukraine, because we have so much stuff to talk about with Ukraine. Because while there's a lot going on down in Syria, and there's a lot going on down in South Korea, there's a lot also going on in Ukraine as well. But Matthew, tell me, what are folks saying in the chat? What kind of questions do we have?
All right, so it looks like our first question of the night is going to go to Jack Ray, who's, of course, a long-time channel legend, and he puts in a $21 donation, and thank you very much, Jack Ray, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. He says, it appears that the rebels have Sherlock Holmes in their sights, and I like that one right there, Jack Ray. That's a good one. By the way, it's Holmes, like the city of Homs in Syria, and it's Sherlock Holmes. I like that. I like that one a lot. But Enforcer, What say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Jack Ray, and helping this channel to keep on running. I gotta say, that's actually a pretty good one as well. I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty funny one right there. And I also have to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who have helped to make this thing possible for quite some time. Tonight, we've actually had a peak viewership of 9,000 people exactly. Not an incredibly big night, but still massive in context, considering that we used to only get about, I think it was like 5.5 thousand people at the peak. We still got 9,000 tonight. One of the lower days of the past few weeks, but still, that's absolutely impressive, and we're honored and grateful to have every single one of y'all here. And I gotta thank you so much, Jack Ray, for supporting this channel, being an old guard and a channel legend, and throwing in a pretty good joke as well, because I think that the Syrian government is about to lose their homes, probably very soon. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to JRG Projects, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, JRG, for that support as well. He said, a question on Korea. If the president holds his grip on power despite parliament, do you think he would attack North Korea when their military is being chewed up by Ukraine due to the coup attempt, and technically both sides are still at war?
I have a doubt that that would happen, because considering that right now his real battle is with the internal government, I have a feeling that he would probably lose all military support, and also he would lose all efforts to really control the internal situation against his control on power if he was then to direct pretty much all military efforts against the North Koreans. That's also ignoring the fact that the North Koreans are nuclear armed, so they could just start flinging nukes into South Korea if they ever needed to, and considering that the North Koreans do have a preemptive nuclear strike doctrine, that would be a high possibility. So with that in mind, I would say no. I believe that the chance of Yoon Suk-yeol using any kind of armed forces action against North Korea at the moment is most likely highly unlikely. I would assume that it's very unlikely, considering that right now he's currently trying to use the army in the struggle for the government. And while an army is incredibly large and strong, and it wouldn't really require the entirety of the military to go and conduct a coup like this, it never really does, you still have to be able to have the army at least largely in your pocket, and if you're sending them into a war at the exact same time you're fighting the other part of the government, that might start to lose you a lot of loyalty, as it may actually truly look like you're just insane at that point and lashing out however you can. So, in my opinion, I would say probably not. I would highly doubt it if that was to happen. But another interesting thing, though, about what's going on in South Korea is that right now, to explain at least the political situation of the moment in South Korea, there are two different parts of the government, and we can largely say that one of them is the presidential faction, and the other one is the parliamentarian faction, or the National Assembly's faction. Both of them are vying for control of the government. If the National Assembly actually somehow ousts Yoon Suk-yeol, they have won this battle for control of the government, largely meaning that the actual elected Congress of the people still remains in power. If Yoon Suk-yeol is able to achieve a victory, he destroys the National Assembly and he creates a dictatorship inside of South Korea. Either way this goes, the military is going to be very important to which side wins. Because the public, as much as the public is important in these kinds of things, it really is the military that actually shifts the control from one faction to the other. And so depending on whose orders the military follows, that will largely show us who is actually in charge of the government and who's going to end up winning this attempted government coup. Right now, at the moment, at least based off of the last action that was done, it appears that the National Assembly actually is controlling the military, and the military is loyal to the National Assembly at the moment, considering that the National Assembly voted against martial law, had no actual enforceable powers to do so, or really no authority to do so, but nevertheless the military obeyed the order and then returned back to their barracks after the vote had been cast. So it appears that at least at the moment, the key military commanders that were actually involved in the coup apparently were all more loyal to the National Assembly than they were to the office of the president, and so for this reason, it's already showing that the loyalty of the South Korean army is wavering and most likely moving towards the National Assembly side and not the president's side. If the president is to declare martial law again, we will have to see what will happen, because at the moment we already know that the loyalty is fairly questionable of the armed forces to the president. It's more so towards the National Assembly. But the next time martial law may be declared, there may be different units used or a smaller amount of them, and we may see that there's actually either a division in the army where some of them remain loyal to the president and some of them remain loyal to the National Assembly, which may create a civil war, or we may see that all of them shift towards the president or towards the National Assembly, Assembly, which will pretty much dictate the exact way that the South Korean government will fold, either to the National Assembly or to the presidency. So we'll have to really see how that goes, because that's really what we're looking at the moment, and what we're waiting for is to see what is the army going to do in this situation. It doesn't matter what the president's doing. It doesn't matter what the National Assembly is doing. It matters whose side does the army fall on. And if it falls onto the National Assembly side, they've won. If it falls onto the presidency side, South Korea will turn into a dictatorship. And so with that, I hope that gives you all a really good lay of the land right now and what we're really trying to assess and really look for. So if y'all want to follow this and really get an understanding of what's happening, just pay attention to what I told y'all right there and watch the news carefully. And if you see the army making specific actions, you'll largely know at that point what faction has actually won the coup attempt at the moment. And so with that, I hope that addresses that. All of that best I can. And also, let's see, I see someone here saying, let's see, 38,000 members. Let's see. And Michael McMahon, I understand what you're saying there, but the United States is never going to get involved in South Korean internal affairs. We have never gotten involved in any of the coup attempts, whether they were successful or unsuccessful before. The United States of America is not there to pretty much control or dictate how South Korean politics goes. We are just there as a peacekeeping force, stopping the North Koreans from invading South Korea. That's largely how it works. The United States is not going to use our armed forces inside of South Korea to directly get involved and dictate the way it goes. We've never historically done that. We probably will not do that right now, because that could create a great deal of resentment. Like, for example, because this is probably the way it would go, the United States would consider that the National Assembly would probably be somewhat weak, considering that there are multiple factions inside of the National Assembly. We may actually choose to go on the side of the President of the Republic of Korea, because on a strategic level, that would be somewhat more stable, considering that there would be no more factions and all of the power would be consolidated in the President. So at least on a Department of State level, the Department of State would most likely game plan it out to where they would actually back the President if they were involved, which would generally be very unpopular with the public in South Korea and could have long-lasting results down the line that could deteriorate U.S. and South Korean relations. If we get involved, however, on the side of the National Assembly, we may actually support, and we will support, what's more popular inside of South Korea, but at the same time, we may see that out of the ashes of this government attempted coup comes a government that is highly fractional, what would we call it? Highly fractured, I guess is the best way to say it, and also there may be factions that are heavily resentful of direct U.S. military involvement inside of domestic internal affairs. The best situation for us in this case is to actually just sit it out and do nothing like we've done for the past 70 years and just let whatever happens happens. Because the general gist is, at the moment, whoever wins, whether it is the President or the National Assembly, the United States will still be able to stay inside of South Korea, and they'll still defend them from the North Koreans. So it isn't really our concern on a strategic level who is winning this coup, whether it be the National Assembly or the President. We just want to simply ensure that U.S. forces remain in mainland Asia in some way, shape, or form in this region. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, because the U.S. military historically has never gotten involved in South Korean affairs, and that would honestly be a little bit too much to ask as well, because we really don't get militarily involved in anyone's coups anywhere inside the Western world. Turkey has had endless numbers of them, and U.S. forces have never gotten involved, even in the one that happened in 2016. There have been other coups that have also attempted to happen as well in other countries throughout NATO over time, and we've never gotten involved in them. That's just something that the United States is never supposed to be actively involved in. And while people may morally agree or disagree with it, it's really more so about our strategic standing in the world, more so than it is the morality of the situation itself. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and our last one here goes to Santiago Flores, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, for always supporting the channel and helping to keep us running. And Santiago says, for the coffee fund and the analysis of Tucker Carlson was spot on. Oh, we got Tucker. He's back in the chat again. He said he's a provocateur and a shock jock, just to get likes and to provoke, and keep up the good job. And also, by the way, Santiago, I saw that interview was released today that Carlson did with, it looks like Lavrov here. And And based on what I've heard, some people were saying that it was actually somewhat balanced. I haven't personally watched it. I'm personally out of Pepto-Bismol, and I could not watch it. I couldn't stomach it. So based on what I'm seeing here, a lot of people were saying it was fair, but honestly, I really doubt that because everything coming out of Lavrov's mouth is a lie. And also, Tucker seems to be kind of like on the fence of pro-American interests and also anti-American interests. So I think I would agree with you, Santiago, personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for backing up what we were saying. What I have heard, though, the general gist, now I want to make this clear. I watched the Putin interview as soon as it came out from beginning to finish, and that interview was so bad that it made me not want to watch the second one. Like, I literally watched the Putin interview from beginning to end, literally till the last second, to make sure that we didn't miss anything and we can analyze it here on this channel. But that one was so damn bad, and it was so anti-American and one-sided for the Russians that well, not we, but I just could not stand it, and I was like, I'm not watching the Lavrov one. So I personally have not seen the Lavrov one at this point, just to put that out there as a full disclaimer. Nevertheless, I have heard that the main takeaway on the internet is that the whole thing was that, oh my god, the Russians have nukes and they could totally kill us all, and that's so scary, and we should bend our knee, because, you know, it would be better to to live with no morals than to die with dignity. That was kind of like the thing that I guess came out of the interview, for the large part, at least from what I'm hearing. I guess I'll have to go and watch it. I'll have to subject myself to the torture of watching that and getting the information and all of that stuff out of it, but I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not even a big fan of trying to watch it. I'm generally not a fan of someone going over to a country like that and really being one-sided. Like, and a lot of people are going to go, well, it isn't one-sided, and he's a patriot and all that. And we went over this last night. He's not really a patriot. He is more so chasing the bag, to be entirely honest. And the other thing is that he has never gotten the Ukrainian side. Now, I'm not going to listen to the crap, because it is crap, that the Department of State, the U.S. Department of State, somehow has suppressed his freedom of speech and stopped him from talking to President Zelensky, because that makes no sense. President Zelensky has literally talked to literally anyone and everyone who's wanted to talk to him that has money. So David Letterman, Lex Fridman is next. Not us. We don't have enough money, so we don't care. And then a whole bunch of other people. So that is a little bit ridiculous to say that he would not talk to Tucker Carlson, because he would. And he has shown that in the past. He will talk to anyone. So with that in mind, Tucker Carlson deliberately went out of his way to misinform the story and mislead people to show that the United States and the shadow government and the mole people in the background are stopping him from talking to Zelensky and uncovering the truth, so he can only talk to the Russians because they're the only people willing to talk. And then in reality, it's the complete opposite. The Russians will never take anything but total victory, and now the Ukrainians are willing to possibly allow some concessions in the war to end it at this point. So,
well, let me give you a snippet here. I was looking here at Carlson's post on Twitter to see what the timestamps are. Here's a gist of how the interview went without even watching it. One of the timestamps says, I'm just going to name the person off here. This is what the timestamp says. It says, Biden pushes the U.S. toward a nuclear war before Trump takes office. Another one says here, Boris Johnson wants the war to continue. Let's see. Another one says here, let's see here. Who's making foreign policy decisions in the United States? It can't be the president. It's just stuff like that. Like, it's that type of stuff, like the Russian propaganda lines that they always like to put out there. Like, there's a deep state or something like that making decisions. It's the same crap being pushed. And Tucker was sitting there just letting Lavrov eat it up, basically. So it was just a joke, probably.
it probably was. I'll go watch it, though. I cannot stand to think I'm going to waste hours of my time watching this thing, but I'll go watch it. But those kinds of things, it's not a great deal. Also, someone just said you were one-sided. Yes, we are pro-American and pro-Western. I'm never going to entertain a pro-Russian or a pro-Chinese sentiment on this channel. I'm an American, so I'm going to stand up for American values and American interests. That means that, yes, I'm not going to be a fan of the Russians or the Chinese or the Russian and the Chinese objectives in the world. This is not a game where we go, you know what, let's do it fair. Okay, Timmy got some apple juice, so let's give Jimmy some apple juice. We're not in kindergarten here. This is a foreign diplomacy. And in foreign diplomacy, we are here for our interests and our interests only. And while we may be able to compromise a little bit, at the end of that compromise, we still need to be winning somehow, some way. That's how it works. That's the world we live in here. And I'm not going to be entertaining some idea that we have to be fair with the Russians. And considering what that interview sounds like, it is once again sowing discord and discontent in the American public discourse, once again off of statements that don't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't think anyone can really get around the fact that Well, let's see. We're going to hold off on that comment. I'll make sure to say it another way here. The president of the United States, whoever the president is at the moment, is the one in charge. Without question. That is the guy in charge. There is no shadow government. There's no shadow cabinets. There's none of that stuff. What you see is what you get. And some people may say that the current sitting president, who's going to be gone in about a month and a half, may not seem to be that mentally coherent, which may be a fair argument considering that it seems that everyone agreed on that. But beyond that, however, whether he's mentally coherent or not, that president is in charge. He has advisors. He has a cabinet. Maybe the cabinet's largely advising him. He's just taking the direct advice from the cabinet and putting that into practice. That may be the case. President has discretion on how much he listens to his cabinet or not. I don't know if a lot of people forgot about that, but if you're wanting to call anything the shadow government, it's literally right in front of y'all's eyes, and you've been seeing it for centuries at this point. The cabinet in the presidency advises the president. The president could just be taking advice from the cabinet. And that is what it is. But he's still in charge, and he's still the one calling the shots. I mean, I think that's fairly obvious, especially with some of the actions that have been happening, at least today, with a certain presidential pardon. He's able to call shots, and he's calling them. So, and I'm not weighing in with that statement there on whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, but he's certainly sure as hell calling shots when he wants to call them. So he's coherent enough to make decisions. So the whole idea that the office of the president is a sham office is ridiculous because the president is in charge of the executive and makes decisions in the executive. This president does, the next president does, the president before him did, and the president before that did. Everyone's making the decisions in the office of the president. That is the president. So that is a ridiculous thing, and once again, one of those anti-Russian sentiments that start sowing discourse in the country because they're trying to make it sound like the people really aren't in charge and the president really isn't in charge. It's this little shadow government of mole people somewhere living underground that are actually in charge. That's something that's ridiculous. It's once again trying to play into causing division in this country by a foreign power. And I got to tell y'all, I'm absolutely sick and tired of foreign interference getting inside a political discourse and then people run with what our enemies and our rivals of the republic say around the world and taking that at face value. The Russians are bold-faced liars, as well as the Chinese, and any input or any statements on how America is run from the Russians and the Chinese ought to be cast aside and thrown away. It is absolute bullshit. There's no other way around it. They don't know how to run a country because if they did, they would be as successful as America. They have no damn clue. That's why Russia is poor, and that's why China is almost half broken at this point. And those are no two countries that you want to be getting advice on what internal domestic politics inside the United States needs to look like or what it should be looking like in the future. Both of them, the Russians and the Chinese, back separate groups in America on opposite sides and continuously push them to more extreme and more violent paths because they know that the more extreme and the more violent they make both of those sides, the better the outcome is going to be for them. It's not about dividing Americans. It's about understanding that these people are truly our enemies. They're not some nice, kind friends from outside of America that are truly trying to help you. They are trying to have you destroyed and have your family and your entire lineage wiped out by a conflict or by internal strife that they can create from outside of America's borders. That's what these people are doing. And if people don't wise up to that on the Chinese Communist Party's part and the Russian Federation's part, this country is going to go to hell in a handbasket, and the people of this nation, as well-intentioned but unfortunately misinformed as some of them are going to create. People ought to be listening to American voices in this country, not the Russians or the Chinese. And that's 100% what I got to say. I'm not getting political here, but foreign interference has got to come to an end. And I'm tired of these damn communists and these fascists trying to tell America how to run things. We're Americans, and we come up with American solutions to things. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. Thank you for agreeing with our aspects on what Tucker Carlson is, because I generally say, at least based off of what those little footnotes are saying on the video, it once again sounds like anti-American garbage. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, really quickly, I got to address this as well, because it does seem like some people are saying, oh, that sounds kind of political. No, because here's the thing that people aren't getting. The Russians are going to continue some new kind of a rhetoric, anti-American rhetoric, about the incoming president, if people don't know. This isn't something that's just relegated to the current party in charge. They're about to do it on the other party that's coming in as well. If y'all don't see it, it's already happening. I mean, Putin's already making threats against the president-elect's life indirect threats. He's already starting to sit there and say things about how they're not going to accept the American peace deal that is attempted to be proposed here in the future. They are making it very clear that they are going to piss on the forehead of the current president in charge, and they're going to do it to the next one too. And it's about damn time people wise up to this kind of stuff, because the Russians and the Chinese only exist to seed discourse in this country and not to help out in any way, shape, or form. They view the United States of America as their number one enemy, and they're entirely hell-bent on the destruction of this country, and they found out that America is too powerful to destroy from outside of its borders, so now they're going to try and destroy it from within by corrupting the people's minds and turning them against each other, making them think that other citizens of the Republic are their enemy and not the Russians and the Chinese themselves. But that's all I got to say on that. I hope I gave that a good run. But Matthew, what do you got to say?
Also, by the way, I'm not sure if anybody caught this the other day, but Zelensky sat down with an interview for one of the mainstream news network channels, and he actually clarified what was being said on that phone call with the incoming president. And of course, we're not getting political. I'm simply reporting what Zelensky said, what was discussed during the phone call. He said that basically he was assured that Ukraine will get support into the indefinite future. In fact, it may get more support than it was even getting before, so that way they can go into negotiations with Russia from a position of strength. So that was reassuring to hear. That came directly from Zelensky, by the way. He just said that the other day. So even though there are like rhetoric and things running around saying that Ukraine is going to be defunded, that is apparently not the case based on what's actually being said in the background on a diplomatic level. And that's what I've been predicting for some time, and it sounds like that's actually the case.
Yeah, it sounds like it's exactly what we were saying. Like it literally is what we've been saying for a year, and the Russians know that, folks. The Russians know that tooth and nail, that the incoming president is going to be as hard or even more hardline than the prior president. It is a national prerogative to ensure that our strategic interests are secured in Eastern Europe. There is no ifs, ands, buts about it. Every single president is going to do the same thing in Eastern Europe, or even go more hardcore. In some instances in the past, some presidents have gone even more hardcore on the war to end a war, like Vietnam, for example. To bring that up for a second, many people will know, and I'm not going to delve into domestic politics here, I'm just going to explain what happened. But when President Nixon was elected into office, he said that he was going to end the Vietnam War, but he was going to make sure that America exited with dignity. So what he did is, instead of starting to ramp down the war, he actually ramped it up to 10 and started bombing the Cambodians, to make sure that I say that correctly instead of the Cambodians. It's the Cambodians. He started to bomb the Cambodians, and he also bombed Hanoi to hell to get them to go take the Paris Peace Accords seriously and actually create a peace treaty that America could exit on. That's why America exited, is because we bombed the VC and we bombed the North Vietnamese into literal oblivion, to the point that the Paris Peace Accords had to be taken seriously, and that was what allowed us to get a peace treaty that was amicable enough that we could exit Vietnam. That's what happened. And that's probably what's going to happen here in the next coming of the future, is that the United States is most likely going to support Ukraine even heavier to put more pressure on the Russians to have them take peace negotiations seriously, and then the conflict will end. That's most likely what's going to be happening, at least from what I would assume, and that's what should happen, because the Russians are not going to get one over on us. I'll be damned if the Russians or the Chinese get one over on America. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, in my opinion. But with that, we're on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and we've already gotten our last one of the segment, so it's now time for the Ukraine news.
And so with that, we are going to be moving right on into it. A big thanks, Matthew, for doing that transition. That was actually pretty smooth. But moving on into Russia, they are suffering manpower issues once again, as we have been able to see migrant workers are being requested to join the Russian army at exorbitant pay rates. It appears that no one's really a big fan of joining, though, so here's the clip.
Сейчас, если только скажете, что по-русски не понимаете. Это делается очень просто. Для того, чтобы получить гражданство Российской Федерации, можно заключить контракт с Министерством обороны Российской Федерации. Заключение контракта идет от года до 5 лет. После того, как заканчивается контракт, вам дают российский паспорт, и вы становитесь гражданином Российской Федерации. И не надо вам никаких разрешений на работу и тому подобное. При этом 100% будете находиться в зоне СВО. Зарплата идет от 210 тысяч рублей ежемесячно. Я думаю, все равно больше, чем вы здесь зарабатываете. Вот, бесплатное лечение.
He's really
Free
trying to sell it.
healthcare.
Resort-like. It's resort-like healthcare. I don't know what the hell resort-like healthcare is. I don't know, like a warm rag or something. I don't know.
Страхование жизни.
Life insurance. That means nothing in Russia.
The payout is one sack of potato.
Veteran status. That also does not mean anything in
Статус
Russia.
ветерана боевых действий. Ты чё киваешь? Ты понимаешь, о чем я говорю?
Bro, nodding typically means you understand. It's like letting them know that I heard you. You heard me.
He's like, okay, now that this guy's an asshole to me when I'm actually agreeing with him, I'm not joining now. It's like, okay, it's funny, isn't it?
Да. Вот. Кто, желающие есть? Поднимите руки. Нет, кому-то. Желающие?
Oh my lord! Not a single one!
Да-да, едем на родину.
I have a feeling they're probably not going back to the motherland.
I have a feeling they're probably not. They're probably going and being deported after that one. But beyond that, it appears that the Russian manpower issue is still pretty dire. I would assume that it's not going to be getting better anytime soon. But moving on from that and into Ukraine, we were able to see another Ukrainian Gepard hard at work. And take a look at this little thing. The workhorse of Ukrainian anti-air artillery near the periphery of the city of Kyiv. It's one of the last lines. Well, it's one of the first of the last lines of air defense around the city of Kyiv. If anything gets too close, the Gepards generally deal with it. And it's always cool to see the Gepards. I'm a big fan of them personally. But moving on from that and into the Kursk Oblast, we were able to also see Ukrainians hard at work defending the front lines and stopping Russian advances, as we were able to see a Ukrainian mortar crew of the 103rd defending their position of the line by providing supporting fire to the Ukrainian infantry further on up on the front itself. We see them showing a very cinematic clip here of them preparing the mortars and getting them ready. We can see that guy gritting his teeth, and we can now see the tube of the mortar.
Wait a minute, go back for a second. Go back to that guy. Scroll back. Okay, yeah, play from here. Watch this guy's face when he looks up. Watch. He's about to do it.
Oh, what the hell? The video's buffering.
Damn. Come on now. Don't do that.
Oh, here we
me.
go. Here we go.
Oh, here we go. Watch it.
Oh, he's just smiling. I thought he was gritting his teeth. He's just smiling.
Let's see the next guy. Oh,
Oh.
he's received some very good news about something.
He just heard the war's about to end soon. Oh, he's like, bro, and we're gonna win? Yes, we will win. But we can see the mortar strikes in the trees. You see them also posing here. This guy's smiling again. They like to show him smiling. But with that, that's the end of the clip. And moving on from that and into our next one, we were also able to see the Ukrainians hitting Russians in Kursk in the 225th.
Як СПГшники.
Chad music ensues, of course. We see them bringing in some, what appears to be SPG-9 rounds. Oh, and they fire the SPG. The SPG-9 specifically.
That was a lot of smoke from that. Very, very scary.
Free Palestine. Free. Nah, I'm sorry. Access denied. No, there will be no freedom. That's like, I just saw someone say that, Andy, in the chat. I don't know if you see it.
No, I haven't seen that one yet. I don't think it's popped up.
Let's see. I'll take care of it then. Let's see here. Tired of that one. Maybe if they come to an amicable diplomatic solution instead of bombing people, maybe that'll help out a little bit. But anyways, we can see them here continuing to fire the SPG-9. And we see them still firing it right here. And that's the end of the clip, but really nice to see and good to see the 225th hard at work in the area. Meanwhile, we also got to see a 2S5 Hyacinth S at work as well. Check this thing out. Look at them loading it. Look at them getting ready to fire. Look at them. Look at them right there. Impressive stuff. We love the Hyacinths. We don't see them a lot. They're pretty cool, actually. But moving on from that and all the way into the Sumy Oblast, we even got to see some artillery support in Sumy itself, using a gun from 1944. But let me... Right there, and they fired, and then there's the impact further on down the Wii. Right behind that vehicle right there. And we can see, oh, dead on a hit right there. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but really nice to see and good to know that the Ukrainians are still holding the Russians back in Kursk for the large part. But moving on from that and down into the area of the location unknowns, we were also able to see the 67th in training. Look at that. These are some really cool pictures. Look at that AR-15, or that M4 more so. That one's kitted out just like mine back there, honestly. That's pretty cool. We can also see this guy firing a PKP. We can see this guy looking at a phone. And that's the end of those pictures. Nice to see that they ended it out looking at some memes. Meanwhile, we got to see an Uragan in action somewhere in Ukraine. That's actually a vampire specifically. I don't know why I put down an Uragan, but still, it is an RM-70 vampire from the Czech Republic. Really cool. Moving on from that, we also got to see an Su-27 firing a missile right here. Look at this. There goes the R-73, and that was a wonderful video. Meanwhile, we also got to see the Russian casualty report as well, which was significantly high. And, oh, look at that.
Oh man, juicy, juicy, juicy. We got 2 Bobcats in one day on December the 5th, and we've got almost 1,600 troops, blät, approximate to be confirmed. But Enforcer, tell us more.
And it looks as though the numbers are good. 1,580 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 22 APCs, 97 supply trucks, 13 main battle tanks, 21 artillery pieces, 31 drones, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, the numbers were pretty significant, and according to Miss Disa, 1,580 troops is a 200 decrease from prior days. However, the recent day's average of 1,700 is still high. And most categories are steady, but plus 13 tanks is an increase over the recent days. And that is great to hear the report from Miss Disa, keeper of the records. And we're now moving on from the casualty report and on into the area of Wolfchansk, where we got to see what goes into fighting. The entire montage of it from beginning to end. They start the alarm. They wake up in the morning. Rise and shine. Woke up in the morning not feeling like P. Diddy. And they walked outside into another room. We can see a shower here. They wash up, get some toothpaste. That was a very weird application of the toothpaste. They kind of missed the brush. But we can now see them getting some mouthwash, clearing their mouth of any plaque, and also flexing as well in the camera. We can now see them walking into the living room and doing some push-ups. Something unfamiliar to me.
Doing the morning pep talk routine here in the mirror and all that good stuff. He said, "You can do it, man. You can do it."
Don't be the pawn on the chessboard, be the king, or something like that. And then we can see them walking down to the entrance now and going outside. We see them all shaking hands and saying hello, getting ready for the day's activities. We now see some of them puffing some smoke in the back. Hopefully not that hot dog man smoke. We can now see them getting out of the van and going into a grocery store where they meet up with others and shake hands. Now see them getting some groceries and scanning their phone, the Apple Pay app to get these products. You now see them grabbing the coffee.
Look at that. 2 lattes. Getting fancy around here.
They're now getting back in the van. You now see them grabbing some potatoes.
Man, that person has like freaking 5 credit card readers. What's up with that?
Man, sometimes you just gotta have redundancies, I suppose. Shaking more hands. Now they're getting back in the van. Loaded with gats. Real gats. Long-lasting gats. We now see them finally getting to training. They're going to train a little bit. Firing RPGs and such things. You have to get competent at these things, you know. We now see them getting ready to fire a machine gun here. Whipping out the soda. It's a Fanta, actually. Now we can see them loading up the machine gun. Getting it ready to go. And firing it from the shoulder. Very interesting there.
This is just a range day for most people, actually. It's just some fun on the range.
Yeah, conducting some first aid here. Well, some simulated first aid. You see them applying the medical equipment. They're now getting back in the van because After the training and the wake up in the morning feeling not like P. Diddy, it's now time to get ready to go to war. Putting on the gear and getting it ready. See him posing
Doing
in
another pep talk.
another pep talk. And now out the door and into war itself. And now they're on the front. But this is everything that went into a single day on the front line. The waking up in the morning, the training, everything to get out there for a couple of weeks and give it your all on the front. We now see them moving around the front lines through the trees. And this guy's got the RPG ready. He now pops it at the Russians. Bam! We don't get to see the Russian positions, but I'm sure the Russian positions just saw the RPG. We now see him taking a smoke break, and that's the end of the video. It's showing a little bit of the activities of the 3rd Brigade on any given day. Moving on from that and up into the Kupiansk area, we were also able to see that a Russian vehicle was hit near to the area of Pischane. Check this out. And, and they got him.
A big boom. One more down in the books, bliat. Got to take it down. Oh, look, a supply truck. Boom.
Bliat. Coke is Mexico. Whoops, I mean Colombia. I see what you did right there, Dalton Taylor, and I gotta appreciate you greatly for throwing that in. It's a funny joke, I do have to say.
I think that they ought to put the sugar back in the Coke because the high fructose corn syrup is messing with our liver, and also to make sure it's 100% vegan, we need to put the cocaine back in.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie, man.
Joke.
Here's my take though on the corn syrup thing. I think sugar qualitatively is better than corn syrup, but it's like, aren't sugary products in general unhealthy? Like it's like, it's like, is there really even a major difference in between corn syrup and sugar?
No, I think personally the corn syrup is worse. I'm obviously not a health expert or anything, but from what I've seen, it looks like the corn syrup is significantly worse than just raw cane sugar. Although, like, obviously, don't consume cane sugar in mass quantities; you'll still get diabetes. But I think the natural cane sugar, cane sugar is refined quite a bit, so maybe like the raw sugar or something like that would probably be better. But I don't know if that would mess the taste up.
Let's see here. From a health perspective, this is at least what I found really quickly. There is no significant difference between cane sugar and corn syrup, as both are added sugars and can be harmful when consumed in excess. However, some research suggests that high fructose corn syrup might be slightly worse due to its higher fructose content, which can be linked to increased fat storage in the liver when consumed in large quantities. So generally, if you're not just tanking Pepsis every day, you should be fine if it's corn syrup or sugar. And generally, that's kind of the big thing about healthful consumptions of foods, is being moderate in your consumptions and intakes of certain things like sugars. So generally, the thing, it's a whole thing to explain why we use corn syrup more than sugar. Basically, it's cheaper due to tariffs that we've had on foreign sugar for about a century at this point, and that's why we use corn syrup for the large part. But it doesn't really make much sense to switch from high fructose corn syrup to sugar, considering that there really isn't a major difference in between the two, and high fructose corn syrup is still in the end cheaper. So that's what I would say. Other things, though, like a lot of the preservatives in foods these days, now I do generally have an issue with that, because while technically, according to the Food and Drug Administration right now, it is healthy to consume, I think our food and drug standards for tolerable preservatives in food should be a lot more stringent, in my opinion. Not getting political there, but that would be my take.
Like, it's just tough because, like, for example, the nitrates in foods and things like that, it makes stuff shelf stable. So I guess the alternative is they're going to have to, like, switch products out a lot more sooner on the shelf than they would have otherwise. But, that's probably a good price to pay to make sure that people aren't dying of, eating deadly nitrates and things like that. So I don't know. It's probably a good trade-off.
Maybe so. But still, we also got to see the 4th Brigade in action as well near the Seversk area, which we were able to see right here in this clip. Now you see them here moving in. Also, there's a whole bunch of other things to consider as well, because this is something that a lot of people don't think about. There are a lot of people who currently have jobs because high fructose corn syrup is consumed commercially on the amounts it is. If you were to switch over to sugar, which isn't really easily produced in the same volume in the United States as it is from outside of America, that means that a lot of the local economies or the national economies in America that help to produce our sugary products will largely implode, and a lot of that will be taken up by foreign companies that are in countries that can produce the excessive amounts of sugar that would be required for our industries. So with that in mind, then it becomes an issue of who is going to end up getting the job. The people who produce corn syrup, which mostly would be in America because America is one of the largest producers of corn on the planet, or it's sugar, which most sugar would not be grown domestically and processed domestically in the United States. It would be from other countries where the climates are generally more conducive to growing sugar. So, I mean, when you look at it that way from an economic sense, I can certainly see the argument for keeping corn syrup because that may lead to some regional depressions in America where corn production is a staple of a farmer's income.
Maybe so. I would like to get some of that raw sugar cane though, like the actual sugar cane, like the stalk. I want some of that stalk like to chew on, like I've seen some people doing. It looks like it's pretty good.
Yeah, it does look pretty damn good. Oh my lord, and they just demoed the building. I didn't even know what they were doing in there. They leveled the building. They put charges in it while the Russians were inside of it and blasted the thing. That's actually pretty wild right there. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainians catching a drone with a net. And check this out. And they got it. And it blew up. Hey, dude, impressive, honestly.
Bang.
And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Really interesting to see and great to know that they're out there working hard to make sure to knock out those Russian drones, at least on the Seversk front. Meanwhile, down towards Pokrovsk, we got to see a Russian step on a mine. I'm not going to show the clip, but if y'all want to see, y'all can go down the link in the description below and go check it out. But I put it on there just because it was interesting. It's not extremely graphic, but, you know, it does show what happened. Anyways, moving on from that and down to the area of Huilopol, we also got to see some Russian vehicles getting destroyed down here as well, which was very nice. Let's see here. And I see a lot of people, it seems as though, Matthew, a lot of people are actually interested in the sugary products topic here on the channel and bringing up all kinds of different things. A lot of people are actually talking about how corn is a major economic motivator in America, and it certainly is one of our cash crops. And one of the reasons why it's a cash crop is because corn is used for all different kinds of products that are incredibly important in this nation, including that of high fructose corn syrup. Of course, corn being one of the main ingredients in high fructose corn syrup. And that's why I think in the long run, speaking economically about people keeping their jobs, and considering that the difference in between cane sugar, which would have to be foreign sourced, versus corn syrup, which really is only domestically sourced, I would say that it would be better to keep high fructose corn syrup the standard, because there still will be loads of Americans with well-paying jobs if we keep on that standard. That would be my personal opinion. But moving on from that and out of that clip, very nice to see they were able to knock those Russians out. We also got to see a little bit of what Robotny is looking like these days, but apparently that's a little too much. I didn't think it was, but apparently someone else did. But moving on from that and on up into Kyiv, it's now time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1016 of the war. And so without further ado, here is one of the shortest lasting speeches in the history of Ukraine. It's only a minute and 5 seconds long. So it looks as though there will be no restroom break for Matthew and me. But here is the clip. Speech.
Добрий ранок, шановні українці, українки. Щойно підписав указ, який надає силу рішення РНБО про санкції. Це санкції проти тієї частини влади зараз в Грузії, яка здає Грузію Путіну. Саме проти цього зараз в Грузії протести. Важливо, щоб партнери також зараз говорили про свою позицію, чесно заявляли про те, що відбувається. І треба діяти. Так буває в міжнародних справах, якщо вчасно не відреагувати, або якщо відреагувати не принципово, то далі втрачені десятиліття і країни позбавлені свободи. Не можна втратити нікого в цьому регіоні, ані Грузію, ані Молдову, ані Україну. Разом треба захищатись проти Москви. Україна застосувала санкції проти Іванішвілі та його спільників 19 осіб, саме ті, хто продає інтереси Грузії і людей. Ми закликаємо Європу, Америку, всіх світі діяти так само, діяти принципово. Слава Україні!
Rom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is moving us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to all of y'all. It has been a little bit more of a quieter night tonight. Honestly, it's kind of nice here and there to have a bit more of a quieter stream. There were only 9,000 people here tonight, which is crazy because that's still a massive amount, and there are still 7.4 thousand people here right now. And I got to thank you so much once again, everyone, for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover the news for y'all, and it's going to be incredibly fun to get to talk to y'all here in this moment, because it is now time for us to move on into the question segment where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And considering that we were on a very interesting topic, Matthew, about corn syrup versus sugar, we have found some very interesting statistics in the background, at least according to what I could find. And it appears that the United States of America, interestingly enough, is one of the larger producers of sugar in the world, but it's not by a lot. Here's the numbers. Brazil accounts for an entire quarter of the world's sugar production, and India accounts for 18%. And while the United States is on up there at 5%, it's not at all a major share of world sugar or global sugar production. Still large, but not that large. Corn syrup, however, and if I'm finding this information correctly, and let me make sure, let's see here. This is in a total of metric tons. So we produce 8.5 million metric tons. And so let's see here. The United States produces a estimated 7.5 million short tons of corn syrup. And let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find some stuff on this. Unfortunately, I think we'll have to come back to that one because Matthew's also telling me we got to move on into them questions. But still, it's an interesting, and maybe we'll look into it a little bit more later on. But still, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so on the topic of Ukraine, that is, we did get a very interesting piece of news today that apparently one of the options that NATO is considering is creating a demilitarized zone in Ukraine protected by European troops, and that is to ward off the Russians. And that would be in the negotiation phase, of course, and that is a possibility that NATO is thinking about. So what are your thoughts on that? So 33% said it will never be agreed to, while 29% said that is a good and realistic idea, and 27% said that sounds like a bad idea. And honestly, it sounds like a good idea because that would be almost the equivalent of having NATO membership for Ukraine, because if the EU troops were attacked, that would be an attack on a NATO member, most likely, and that would cause maybe an Article 5 response in theory, but that could be debated. But I would say that'll probably never be agreed to. Russia would never agree to that. They do not want European troops on their quote-unquote border, even though it would still not be their land. That would be their quote-unquote new border. So I don't think it'll be agreed to. That's like the equivalent of NATO membership, and they're never going to go with that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say that, in my opinion, that most likely would not be agreed to, a demilitarized zone, as the Russians would probably want to ensure there really is no road blocks in the future, say 10 and 15 years down the road, for another war to start and for them to be right on the point of contact with the Ukrainians when that conflict begins. So in my opinion, I do not believe that would be the case, and considering that it would be protected by European nations outside of Ukraine, that also would not be agreed upon, because the Russians would want a clear shot at trying to get into Ukraine again without pretty much drawing it into a world war immediately. So I would say that probably will not work, in my opinion. So I would have to be with the 33%. It probably will never be agreed to. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And Matthew, what else do we have?
All right, so moving here into our super chat questions. Also, I was trying to find one Twitter post here. It was about this same topic the poll was on, but I'm having a hard time finding it right now. So let me see if I can scroll down and spot it. It was about the NATO situation. Let's see here. I might have found it. So yeah, I was reading here. This is the source of this information, by the way. It was from Bloomberg. They were talking about the potential neutral zone, or the demilitarized zone, that could be an idea for negotiations. Also, it looks like the other outcome was being considered was providing security guarantees to protect Ukraine without provoking Putin. But the catch is, Ukraine's already said they're not going to agree to a mere security guarantee. They either want NATO membership or nothing. So Ukraine's not going to agree to that. So honestly, like all the theories I'm hearing being put out by NATO so far, it sounds like they're pretty much dead ends pretty much because Ukraine's not going to agree to it, Russia's not going to agree to it. So basically, it comes down to the war continues going on, and there's no end in sight. It doesn't sound like anybody really has an idea to end the war at the negotiating table. So, like we've been saying for some time, I think the war is going to continue probably for several more years. Even with the prospect of negotiations on the horizon, they're probably not going to be fruitful, at least in my opinion. But, Enforcer, what do you think?
I'd have to say I don't really see them being fruitful, at least now. We're probably going to have to ramp this thing on up to 10, so that way the Russians take peace accords more seriously and try and get to the negotiating table. Because at this point, I'm not really seeing anything that is really making the Russians move towards negotiations. So that means we need to ramp it on up to 10, so that way they take it serious enough to go get to the negotiating table, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our first super chat here of the last super chat segment is going to go to none other than Terrence Custer, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Terrence, for the $20 support, and we appreciate it. He said, "It's been a while since I donated, and just wanted to say, great job."
And thank you so much for the kind words, Terrence Custer. And it is perfectly fine to have not donated for a while. No one has to support the channel if they don't want to, but we massively thank and appreciate the folks like you, Terrence Custer, who like to support the channel because you help us keep this thing running and pay our bills and keep the lights on. And I got to thank you so much once again for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running, and we wouldn't be able to keep on working on this thing each and every day, 6 days a week. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I saw someone mentioning the idea of a concept of a peace plan. And I do understand where you're coming from on that. There are really no viable peace plans out there, like we were saying, but at least we are hearing in the background, like I mentioned earlier, that the idea behind Ukraine support going into the immediate future, the next months ahead, are that Ukraine's going to receive more support. And even though you're hearing people out there and certain legislative bodies say that we're going to end support, that's not what's being said behind the scenes. And I think that's going to suddenly change here probably in January, and you're going to start seeing more aid going to Ukraine. That will give Ukraine a position of strength, and presumably, even if negotiations don't go well, that will allow Ukraine to once again fight harder on the battlefield. But the one thing I did see today as well is Ukraine formally rejected the idea of lowering their conscription age down to 18. They outright rejected it and said, we need more equipment first, and we're not going to start conscripting lower ages until we get more equipment. I'm not really sure what the idea behind that is, because obviously Ukraine doesn't want to put their 18-year-olds on a battlefield. I think that's one of the primary reasons, but also it seems like they're using that as leverage to get more equipment. So that was a curious topic. I was going to do a poll on that, and I might still do one, but Enforcer, what do you think is the reason behind not lowering that conscription age?
I personally do not know. I would have to be honest with you, because at this point, with how the Ukrainians are saying they're running short on manpower, and considering there's an entire untapped manpower pool in between the ages of 18 and 25, it's a little weird that they wouldn't do that. And I really personally would not know why, because more support is guaranteed largely at this point, especially if the Russians don't take peace accords seriously. They're going to be getting more support. So what's the point of not lowering the draft age? I have no clue, because it seems as though they're going to play that out until they start running out of manpower and they actually need more manpower. Then they're going to lower the draft age. And then for months, they're going to be dealing with massive manpower shortages and possibly start losing defensive positions on the front lines because they just don't have enough available manpower at that specific time, because all of the manpower that should have been available is currently in training at that point because they had just lowered the draft age. Personally, to me, doesn't sound like a good strategy. I don't know what the point is or the aversion to that. And also, another thing, some people are probably going to be like, you're telling them to have their kids die. No, I'm not, because we've signed up for selective service here in America at 18 years old. If you don't, you go to prison. So I had to sign up for it at 18, and I understood if for some reason the United States went to war and they called up selective service, I would possibly be one of the people called up, and that was perfectly fine with me. And I don't know why the Ukrainians are acting like it's absurd to lower the age from 25 to 18, considering that in the United States of America, it's 18. And so with that,
and also, that seems like a really bad thing to outright reject, especially considering the fact they're trying to go into negotiations with Russia on a position of strength. That basically is signaling to Russia that Ukraine's not willing to put more people into the military if it means lowering the conscription age. That's not sending a good message, meaning that they're willing to keep fighting to the death. That sends a message like Ukraine might have some red lines that they're not going to cross, and they might decide to capitulate. I hate to say that word, but they might decide to capitulate before they lower that conscription age. I have a feeling if it came down to Ukraine's survival, they probably would go ahead and lower it. But like the enforcer is saying, you have to have time to put those guys into training. You have to have time to actually round them up to put them into training, and that takes a lot of time. And that's time that Ukraine can't afford to lose when the war starts getting further on down the road. So I don't understand the rationale behind that. I've been saying for a long time they should go ahead and lower that down. And they don't have to necessarily start it right this second. They can delay it for a few months if they want to, but they should go ahead and get that passed in their legislature and go ahead and get that rolling so they can be prepared in case the negotiations do fall apart. And I think there's a very high likelihood of that happening.
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty decent likelihood of this not going well, to be entirely honest. So I would have to be honest. I think that they need to lower the age to 18, considering that one of the things that the Ukrainians complain about the most is manpower shortages, and there's literally a pool of manpower they're not tapping into, and they refuse to tap into. It seems as though the manpower shortage is being artificially created by the Ukrainian government as a talking point, and that's something that I find kind of a little annoying. Like, now, if they had made it down to lowering the draft age to 18 and they were running into manpower shortages, now that's a serious issue. But they have not done that. And it's, in my opinion, it's not really going to end out well, because we're already hearing that they're complaining about manpower shortages. If they're having them now, it's not going to improve, and they're denying their own ability to continue to get more reinforcements into the military while they're needed right now. So when the situation becomes terrible in the future, then they're going to be finally trying to get them in, and by that point, it'll be too late, and there will be some losses on the front lines. Probably not major ones, but there will be some. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Adam McLean, who's a channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Adam, for the $20 support. And Adam says, I saw some evidence that Western intelligence operatives are very likely helping to organize this rebel takeover of Syria. And have you seen anything of the sort?
I haven't personally, and also it wouldn't really make a lot of sense that we would be supporting a group that isn't really backed by anyone. The SSG is the successor to a group that is very famous in American history because of the attacks on 9/11, which is Al-Qaeda. They're largely the successor to that group in this area. And while Al-Qaeda was really weak and wasn't really large or well operated, ideologically these people are a successor to the sympathetic groups that were in this area of northern Syria. They're not a group that we would want to support. It largely is against our greater framework of the war on terror that we've been having really going on for quite some while, even still. And with that in mind, considering that we have another faction inside of Syria, which we've openly supported and helped to field, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces, it would make a lot more sense if we were to groom them and then send them forward into this offensive instead of the SSG, considering that the SDF falls a lot more within our check marks of what we're looking for in a faction. I personally have not heard that the United States has been helping them out at all from any official channels. We have heard that those are a rumor, and of course rumors are rumors. People say all kinds of stuff as rumors, and we can't really take those at face value because there's no real backing behind them. But from what I understand, there really is not any American involvement, at least from what I'm seeing right now. Also, I just saw someone, let me go answer this. Someone said, I think you need to educate yourself further on this rebel group before you make such statements, the enforcer. The group has reformed and made a lot of democratically aligned promises. No. Oh, no, they have not. Let me go pull you up this. Syrian Salvation Government, because that's what they're called. They're called the SSG. So let's go get their information. This is the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This was published in August of 2023, and the title is Examining Extremism, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the SSG, or the HTS as it's called in some groups. This is a very radical group. It is incredibly radical. Really quickly, let me go and just get you the summary of them on Wikipedia. You can also see that they're now updating their map to accurately reflect what they're controlling in Syria at the moment. But nevertheless, they have an official religion, which is Islamic, and generally having an official religion, it's a very questionable thing whether that will be democratic or not. Usually countries that have an official religion these days, especially an Islamic one, tend to fall under a radical extremist mindset. That's generally the case. The government is a unitary, authoritarian, technocratic Islamic state. So, at least according to what we're hearing on Wikipedia, and also from the center the CSIS, to just put out the abbreviation because for some reason I can't remember the actual name, this isn't really a good group. This is a very questionable one. And considering that they came from Al-Qaeda for the large part, or really grew out of Al-Qaeda, that also lets us know that they're not really the forerunners that they would want, because their entire system has grown out of a very radical faction, and while there may be some statements, at least publicly, that they've reformed, I would highly doubt it. It would be a lot better for us to back a tried and true faction that we've supported for most of the Civil War, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces, which truly are democratic and really have been since their inception, and have also not had a major religion. They are secular, and they also want to create a federal Syrian state. These people are far better of a bet than the people who literally grew out of a Al-Qaeda splinter cell. That would be my personal opinion. And also, largely everything out there online isn't showing that these people are nice people. They're very questionable people. And there really is no way about that. Sure, they're destroying the Assad regime and the Russian-aligned Assad regime at that, which is great. But at the same time, it's not really a group I want to be rooting for, to be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that kind of gives an answer to that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to none other than Diva369, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Diva, for that $20 support. And they said, Enforcer, I hereby dub thee Amadeus, or I'm not sure.
Amadeus.
Or I'm not going to pretend like I know, but it's Amadeus of polymology.
And I thank you so much for the support. And let me go pull up what that is, because I don't know what that is, actually. Let's see. So here we go. Let's see here. Hang on here. I want to go pull up the terms specifically. The study of war and human conflict is polymology. I'm mispronouncing that. I know I am. But it's war studies for the large part. And I do thank you so much for the kind words and calling me the Amadeus of war studies. That's very kind of you, Diva, because I actually had to go pull up those words. Those are words that are so advanced they're outside of my knowledge. Kind of like the word equestrian was on the ASVAB, which I got wrong. I did not know that that meant that that was someone who had a particular knowledge of horses. Not any kind of like a weird knowledge, just how to ride them and such things, and was a big fan of horses. I did not know that when I took the ASVAB, and I did not know what that word was, and I still cannot correctly pronounce it either. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and the kind words as well, as elegantly as they were put as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that $20 support and helping to keep the channel running. Of course, a longtime channel legend, by the way, and I do not see a comment attached to it. But thank you very much, Marion, once again. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing rolling. And I got to thank you massively for the kind words and the support, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Rebel117, who puts in a 20. And huge shout out to Rebel for the support. They said, we keep hearing how we need to support Ukraine and that Ukraine can't fall to Russia, but no one really wants to give the necessary weapons nor support NATO membership. Why is that? And also enjoy some coffee.
And I thank you so much for the support. And that's because statement, rhetoric and action are two different things. And this kind of is an issue that's always happened in government, and especially in actual administration, is that it's very hard to actually take rhetoric and immediately translate it into actual action that follows the rhetoric. Rhetoric is usually an idealist sort of a thing. And that's something that a lot of people don't really understand either, is that in politics, it looks as though, and this is not getting into politics, but this is talking about politics in general and kind of bringing it back into, I guess you could say, the ambitions of certain political factions in America, or really all of them simultaneously at this point. Making political rhetoric is one thing. It's very easy to say something in America like, we are going to do this, or we are going to do that. But those statements are completely removing the probabilities that that will not happen due to popular opposition or something along those lines that may make that incredibly difficult, or the compromises that will have to be made to what the rhetoric was to actually bring it to reality in some way, shape, or form. And those are generally major issues on making something like Ukraine support viable. Now, generally with Ukraine support, we're not speaking about internal domestic rhetoric. We're speaking about external foreign rhetoric that we're talking about on what we're going to be doing outside of the country. However, we run into many of the same issues with that kind of a rhetoric and how it actually is put into practice in real life that we deal with domestically. And that issue is, how do the Russians react to it? Now, inside of domestic politics, your general friction will be found against the opposition party. Whoever that party you're not a part of, that generally is where the friction comes from. In foreign policy and diplomacy, the friction comes from an external nation. So in this particular instance, it's the Russian Federation. And the issue with providing Ukraine a lot of support that the current administration in the United States is having to deal with is what is actually crossing the line and what is not crossing the line. There is a line that the Russians actually have. They're going to bluff it all the way, though, and say that everything's a red line, but there is actually a red line that they do have that when we cross, we have crossed the line and will never, we've passed the point of no return, and there will be major consequences as a result, which will be a major conventional war with the Russians. We want to avoid the conventional war, but at the same time, we want to support Ukraine as much as possible and get them into a situation where they're in a strong negotiating position come the time that peace negotiations come about. But the issue with that is that currently inside of the current running administration, nobody really knows where the red line is, and no one will. The incoming administration doesn't know either. But the problem is that they've been very cautious on trying to figure out where that red line is. So what the current administration has done, and this is by no fault, I want to make it very clear, of the president. If anyone should be to blame for this, this is most likely advisors in the cabinet. The advisors in the cabinet will get into cabinet meetings with the president of the United States, and everyone will speak about what should be done to further the Ukraine war for the Western side, which is supporting Ukraine. And so all of these advisors will come up with things like, we could do this, we could do that, and then there has to be a game plan of what we think the Russians will potentially do to each action. And for some reason, the advisors in the cabinet that have been selected, one of the people I would generally say would be at fault for the slow actions of the U.S. government, not speaking for any other national government, would probably be Anthony Blinken. Blinken is most likely saying in the cabinet meetings, Mr. President, I think that this is a great action and an appropriate action. However, we have to consider that this may start to push the Russian Federation across the line, and we may see that there may be a major, broader conflict in Europe if we were to do this. Perhaps we should do this other smaller thing instead, and then wait about a month to see what the actual Russian reaction is, and then we can move forward. And so really the best thing that we can say at the moment is that while the rhetoric has been strong from everyone really, and we see that the president-elect's rhetoric is also starting to become stronger at this point on dealing with the Russians, everyone's really trying to figure out how should we approach this, cautiously or less cautiously. Currently, the current administration is dealing with this in a more cautious sort of an approach, which I cannot really complain about, because they're dealing with something that has never really been seen before in Europe for 70 years, and they're wanting to make sure that it doesn't turn into a world war, and that's really the priority, is to not turn it into a world war, but also not lose in Ukraine. So they've been largely cautious about how they've approached this. However, I have a feeling, considering that the cautious approach is the one that has been taken by the current administration, that the next incoming administration will most likely be taking a little bit more of a wild and loose approach. Because while we are understanding that at this point we are getting closer to a Russian red line, we also understand that there is a little bit of room before that line is reached. So the next incoming administration will most likely attempt peace talks. They will fail, and then we'll see that the actions are actually ramped up, probably not even to match the rhetoric, because the rhetoric at the moment, which will be confusing to many in the public sphere, is that the president of the United States wants to see a peace in Ukraine. However, that does not mean that peace will be achieved by completely giving up or completely giving in. And it appears at this moment that they're not going to be giving in, because that's what Zelensky's saying, is that they're actually going to be ramping up the conflict to a point that it is so severe on a diplomatic level, and it's something that cannot be ignored, to the point that it forces everyone to the negotiating table, because everyone wants to hop off of this ride instead of keep riding until it runs into a brick wall. So with that in mind, that's kind of why so far we've seen that the rhetoric has been strong, but the support has been slow or small, is that everyone's cautiously trying to approach this because we don't know how much friction the Russians really would give and how severe each consequence may be to each action we take. That's really what the issue is at the moment, speaking about it in a very clinical way on how the government is actually approaching this. And that's why everyone's always saying really big things about Ukraine, but there's not really a lot of support in that direction. And another thing that I have to throw out there is that as far as foreign affairs are concerned, NATO is largely operating as a homogenous bloc in regards to Ukraine. And that's why you'll see that with other NATO countries, they kind of follow America's lead. Very few of them fall out of that framework of being overly cautious. Most of them are overly cautious because they are confiding in the U.S. Department of State and the Office of the President, and the Office of the President and the Department of State are all saying, look, we really don't know what the Russians will do to this next action, so let's just do this action as a singular thing and then wait it out to see what happens. And hopefully that will lower the tensions by the time we do the next action. Even if it is possibly crossing a red line, if it was done immediately after the last one, it won't be too severe. And that's what we've generally been seeing. I think that's about to change, though, to be entirely honest with y'all. I think we're going to start seeing that this thing gets ramped up to 10. A lot of people are going to get scared by that, and a lot of people are going to be really confused, because a lot of people have been hearing that the war is going to end. A lot of people don't understand the war is probably going to end because it's going to get so damn bad that everyone wants it to stop. That's probably what the reality of it's actually going to be. And folks will really just have to sit around and wait. I'm not expecting that we're going to give up anything in Ukraine at this point. I have a feeling that we're going to try and gain a little bit from what's going on in Ukraine, but it's going to take a lot to get to that point. And so with that, I hope that answers your question incredibly well. It's a really good question, but I hope that I gave a really good statement on how the government as an apparatus is working and why the actions are kind of moving that way, where it's a lot slower than what they're really wanting to do. And so, Matthew, do you have anything to add to that question, considering that you are the political science expert here?
Well, I will say this, without getting into like politics or anything like that. Blinken, the Secretary of State, he's usually more on the fence when it comes to his foreign policy, like positions, and obviously he has to carry out the president's foreign policy vision, but he has a more on the fence view. It's Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. He's the one who's typically the appeasement guy and typically goes along the lines of we should de-escalate everything, and that's why he's really developed a really bad reputation, because that has not worked very well, and he's largely in the president's ear telling him this is the best way to do it, and for some reason that's been what's been being put forward in foreign policy around the world. So I think Blinken might have caught a stray there because he's usually the one saying that more support should go to Ukraine. And Sullivan says that as well. He says support to Ukraine, but at the same time, it's like an undertone of we should send more support, but only if we don't scare Putin. It's like, well, you're just like negated the idea of sending more support, because if you're worried about scaring Putin, you wouldn't send anything. And, I just don't think his mindset's led to a good position personally. And, the sooner he gets out of there, the better.
And also another thing that is kind of the reason why. You know what? I think this is how it's working. You are right. I misspoke. It's not Blinken. It's the other fella, which for some reason I'm now forgetting his name as soon as I was about to say it. Say what?
It's Jake Sullivan.
Yeah, it's Jake Sullivan who's saying that stuff. What's probably happening in the cabinet meetings, now I got to reverse the whole thing and restate this. What's probably happening in the cabinet meetings is that Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken are both in there at the same time. I assume that many people know, and this isn't really kind of like a hidden secret anymore, it's kind of known by everyone at this point, that the president may not be of incredibly sound mind, and so he may be leaning a lot on the cabinet at this point to help him make the decisions that are running foreign affairs with Ukraine. And so with that in mind, it may be showing that Jake Sullivan is actually has a lot more access to the president, and that more overly cautious sort of an approach is the one that's being acted upon, is because that's really the thing the president is hearing the most at this point. That probably is the case of what's going on. That would make the most sense at the moment, because it is true that Anthony Blinken is the one who's generally saying that there should be more support to Ukraine. But at the same time, though, Matthew, I think that behind closed doors, he's kind of a little bit closer to what Jake Sullivan's saying, and he's kind of more on the slightly cautious side. So you blend the two, and you get overly cautious and slightly cautious, and then you end up with something that's generally cautious. That's what I would assume.
You're talking about Blinken? You think Blinken's that way?
I would think he is, because the rhetoric publicly is one thing, but I'm sure that the cabinet meetings are a very different kind of a ball game, to be entirely honest. Because
I would honestly say I would honestly say that Blinken strikes me as a type person that if he's like hearing the president say something, he will generally just agree with it and go with it. Sullivan strikes me as a type that even though he comes across as weak, he is the more apt person to really speak up and say, "Well, no, Mr. President, we can't do that. It will make Putin angry." Like he'll probably speak up a lot quicker to like back down and run from a situation like that. He just strikes me as that type of person. So I would say that Blinken honestly. Like Blinken's a tricky one because he comes across and presents himself well, in my opinion. But at the same time, he really doesn't seem to have any real strong positions in anything. He kind of just like goes with the flow. But Sullivan is not a go with the flow type guy. He's more of a let's back off and chill out and not do anything to protect our interests.
Yeah, but going with that dynamic, though, you can see, though, where the overly cautious approach of Sullivan will certainly win over on what Blinken wants. Because Blinken is, like you said, he's more of a go-with-the-flow kind of a guy than one who's really assertive. So in the end, Jake Sullivan's going to win out, and the overly cautious approach is the one that will be carried out for the large part.
Yeah, generally so. And also, Jared does stuff said, I thought we don't get political. This isn't political. This is just examining what their processes are, their thought processes are about the foreign policy thing. I'm not saying whether or not I hate either one of them. I will say I don't necessarily care for the de-escalation policy that's been being put forward. And I think at this point, the de-escalation policy has been proven to be ineffective. I think that's pretty much universally agreed upon. That has not led us to a good situation. It's led to actually emboldening dictators around the world. So we probably shouldn't do that anymore. Should probably move on to, like, once again, supporting Ukraine even stronger and harder than before to make sure Russia knows that they're not going to simply back off and be squashed if they keep dragging the war out for many more years. But, if you have appeasement people hanging around, there's always that hope in the back of Putin's mind that maybe one of the appeasement people will eventually win out and their opinion will stick, and maybe Ukraine might end up being forced to give up. So, the appeasement thing just never good.
Also, Matthew, I want to make sure we're understanding the situation correctly with foreign policy, correct, about the cabinet meetings and the discussions that would be had and how actions would be taken as a result of that. We are understanding that fairly right, considering you're the political sciences major.
Yeah, they all sit down for cabinet meetings. They also sit down for one-on-one meetings occasionally. Sometimes the president will specifically summon certain advisors into his office for a private meeting. But generally, though, they are supposed to meet, at least in theory, on a regular basis to discuss the foreign policy developments. The only catch is the meetings here have not been taking place on a regular basis here recently. They've been very sporadic, which is kind of unusual. But they do meet all the time. And they, once again, whoever speaks the loudest typically has the biggest access to the president's ear.
And that probably is what we're seeing at the moment. I saw someone say that that's not how any of that works. It largely is, because believe it or not, the government is literally just made up of people who talk, and then they come up with something out of all of that talking and go with it. And that's really how the office of the president works, especially because the president really just confides in his cabinet, and that's it. That's why the cabinet's a really important group. A lot of people understate it these days. They act like the president is like God, and he just comes up with everything in his mind and just works on it. But the reality of the fact is very different. The reality of the fact is that a lot of the decisions that the president makes really aren't his decisions. They're really the decisions of an amalgamation of people who are in the cabinet, and he's listening to them and then coming up with what may be the best course of action after it's been game planned out after a whole bunch of brainstorming with the cabinet. And that's why I find it so funny when some people who do not know about how the government works are like, that doesn't really sound like the president. That sounds like a shadow government. It's like, no, it's just the cabinet. Like, they all got together and talked about it, and then they came up with this as their idea. That's like how it always worked, and some people, I guess, failed civil studies, and now they don't understand how the executive branch works, but that's how it always works. And so that's why we're talking about that. And some people, they're saying, this sounds political. It's not, because I'm not condemning the cabinet or the current president, and I'm not praising them either. I'm just trying to explain, based off of that question, how it's actually working. And they'll work a little bit differently. Well, it works off the same framework, but it'll work differently when the incoming president-elect becomes president, because the incoming president-elect will become the president in late January, and then he's going to have his own cabinet of his own people, and he's going to be calling them in for a cabinet meeting, and he's going to go, okay, so what do we have? And someone's going to generally explain the situation. And then if, of course, this is going off of a perfect framework here, he's going to go, okay, so do we have any ideas? He'll throw out his general idea, though, of I really want to achieve this end goal, but how are we going to achieve it? And then everyone in the cabinet who really pertains to that will start throwing out their ideas on what should be done. That's generally how it will work. And then then a general plan of action will be made out of the cabinet meeting, and then they'll go forward with it. That's how every single president works. That's how we think the next one's going to work. And we have a feeling. We have a feeling that it's not going to be going well here in the beginning of next year. Just to explain how it's going to work, the incoming president's going to come in. We are already getting an idea that they're already planning that's not going to go well. But he's going to be like, okay, let's get to some peace talks. How is it going to work? And they're going to be like, well, we could do this with the Russians. We could do that. They are going to try everything they can with the Russians, within reason. Of course, they're not going to be saying we'll give up Ukraine, but they're going to try everything within reason. Putin's going to tell them to get bent, and then the next cabinet meeting is going to be, okay, now we have to bomb the Russians into oblivion. How are we going to do that through Ukraine? And that's probably what the next cabinet meeting is going to end up being, because they're going to have to try and get the Russians to a negotiating position somehow, and the only way to do that in a war is to just bomb them harder. So that's probably what the end result will end up becoming. So I hope that gives you all a really in-depth answer on how it really works behind the scenes. So it's going to be a little bit of a lengthier conflict. We are very certain of that. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next... Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I think our internet might have gone out.
Yeah, our internet went out. It went out on my end. I was thinking, I pray to God that this is not just my computer and it's yours too. Did your internet go out?
No, mine kept working the whole time, but I was assuming maybe it went out on your end.
Yeah, it went out on my end without a doubt. It literally showed that there was no internet coming at all. That is scary. But go ahead, Matty. Can you reread that super chat, because we are back?
So, Uncovered Cube said, Kentucky's motto is together we stand divided and we fall. And I've always loved it. And how about a rabbit hole on the Illinois Railroad and LSA?
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And let me make sure to go reread that super chat really quickly, so that way I can make sure to cover everything in it. Because we got to cover everything in that one, right? Like, we got to. And so, let me see here. Let's see. Kentucky's motto is together we stand, divided we fall. That's a very Civil War kind of a motto. That's actually a really good one. I forgot what Alabama's motto is. Let's see. Alabama State.
Take the money and build more prisons.
Let's see. Ours is we dare defend our rights.
We dare. Man, I dare you to defend your rights. I mean, that sounds like really Alabama-esque.
Also, our state bird is apparently the I always called this thing the yellow hammer, but apparently it's called the northern flicker now, which is a little interesting. I always remembered it being the yellow hammer. Don't you, Matthew?
I thought it was too.
Yeah, that's weird. I think they renamed it. But the Alabama state motto is a little bit of an interesting one with a fairly interesting history. We will not get into that on stream, though, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense as a motto. We dare defend our rights. Like, yeah, that's kind of what America does. That's, I don't get it. I personally don't get it in the modern context. It's like, it doesn't really make sense anymore. I feel like our motto should change. But beyond that,
could we have some money? Please go toward the streets and not the prisons. I dare you to defend your rights.
Man, let's see. Let's come up with a good motto for Alabama these days. It would start off with F the streets and then something else. Let's see. F the streets, put them in the cleats. Like, the prison shoes or whatever, like, or something like that. That would be the real Alabama motto. Or another good motto would be, let's see. Let me think of another one. Screw the roads, buy less fishing boats, something like that. It would be something goofy at this point, because I'll tell you something. When you live in Alabama and you pay attention to things, you'll see that it's just it's not an ideal kind of a place around here with how some of the basic civil functions are done. And especially with how some of the things, at least administratively, are run. We have an issue here in Alabama. It's kind of an issue in most southern states, but especially in Alabama, of this thing called the good old boy system, which dominates pretty much any kind of rural ordinance or rural governance outside of the major cities, because there will be a little clique that forms in every single town inside of rural Alabama, and they pretty much run the show. If you're not in that in-group, you can just might as well consider your opinion pointless. They will not listen to it. You will never get them out of office, and they will just do whatever the hell they want. We came from a town like that before we moved to Birmingham, and it was pretty annoying, because you would see stuff like the roads are not being paved, but they would go throw $10 million into a new high school football field. the like ass backwards mindsets right there. Like the road should come first before the football field because you got to drive to get to the football field. So why in the world build the football field and then all the roads around it are crumbling? Makes no sense to me.
If you want to see a good documentary on Alabama to know how it really is, there's a really good thing that the BBC made a while back.
Oh,
It's
no.
it's Top Gear's Jeremy Clarkson driving through Alabama with the vehicles with some really interesting slogans on the side. If you go watch that, you'll see they call in the boys, they brought in the pickup trucks and the dogs too, and you got to go see it because it's very interesting.
It is pretty interesting. But I really wish, and I got to say this also because some people are, it's sad because sometimes I just want to make comments on things, and then people will say, like, I keep on seeing this one. You're like, oh, you're a neocon or a liberal because I'll say something that may be a little bit on the line about maybe making a comment about something. And because Alabama has a certain kind of a state government, I'm sure that many people are going to be saying now that I'm a liberal. I can be honest with you, I went to California, which is on the opposite end, and I didn't really see a lot of good things out there either. So this is more so kind of just a qualitative assessment. It has nothing to do with domestic politics. But Alabama's got issues, and I wish it'd fix it. There is no fixing it, though, because for some reason everyone loves the well, I don't really think anyone loves the governor, but for some reason no one's willing to vote the governor out. I don't know what's up with that. And the governor has goofy ideas, like let's build more prisons. Like there was this idea, this Rebuild Alabama program that went on for a while, and it didn't really do much. Like, it didn't really pave a lot of the roads. A lot of the roads are still in pretty tough shape, and the infrastructure is still in pretty tough shape. It's not good. It's like we gotta work on the infrastructure. Like, in my personal opinion, one of the few functions of a government is to maintain public infrastructure. Like, that is one of the few. Like, that pertains to public transportation of all varieties. So the roads have to be good, the railroads have to be good, the airports and the ports have to be good. That is one of the main priorities of a government. And I feel like most governments these days completely fail at those basic forms of function. Like, they completely focus on form over function of the government. And I feel like the government should be doing it the other way around. Forget the football stadiums for just like 5 years. We don't need to build a brand new football stadium, and the football coaches don't need to be getting paid about $500,000 a year. We need to build some nice roads, and then we can focus on the other stuff later. Like, it's annoying to me. And then, like, some of our state parks are just put to the ringer. Like, for example, Fort Morgan is one of the most important state parks in Alabama because Fort Morgan actually was the site of a major battle in the Civil War that saw pretty much the fall of the Confederacy as the Union would take control of the mouth of the Mobile Bay and pretty much ensure that one of the major ports, which was Mobile at the time, was completely denied access by Confederate forces. Well, by Union forces to the Confederacy. And so Fort Morgan is a very important fort, and they let this thing get overgrown to a tremendous degree. They put no funding into our state parks. They look horrendous. And considering that this is kind of a bit of a tourism pool, considering that some people like to see things like this, you would think that more money would be put in these kinds of directions for basic public infrastructure and upkeep. You would think that state parks would be maintained better. You would think that the roads would be paved better. They just simply aren't. You would think that there would be at least some sort of a state fund for public sanitation. And yes, there is sanitation in the state, of course. There's always a minimum level in every state. But you would think that they would have people out there sweeping the streets and keeping them clean, but there are none of those people. So there is sometimes in the cities just raw garbage, and it's crazy to me to see that. Like, it's not that hard. Seattle was able to do it. We went to Seattle. Matthew can say I saw it too. The streets were clean. I don't know anything else about the city of Seattle, to be entirely honest with y'all, rather than the streets were clean when I went there, and I was blown away by that. It was like the only city in America where I've seen the streets are clean. Lessons need to be learned from that. However they're running their sanitation department in that one particular instance for that one city, everyone else needs to implement a similar formula to that, because it was crazy to see how clean the city was on a street level. And so those are some of the issues and complaints I have with the state. Beyond that, state's pretty great. People in it are pretty nice. Most of them are. Some of the people that you end up running into are not, but those are kind of the outliers. It's a great state beyond that. It's just that the state government, much like any other state government, mismanages it in different degrees. And I hope that that is fixed someday. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support and bringing up your state motto. And also, really quickly, we do have to look at that Railroad. And everyone knows that I love a good railroad. And so let's take a look at the L&O Railroad. And let me take a look here at the L&O Railroad. I haven't looked at the L&O before. The Lexington and Ohio Railroad. It was the first railroad in the U.S. Commonwealth of Kentucky, developed in the 1830s. It was the second oldest railroad line west of the Allegheny Mountains. And let's see, its charter proposed the establishment of a link. Line was never completed, and the Panic of 1837, which was like an economic, well, it actually was a Great Depression in America, led to its complete collapse. The Commonwealth seized the railroad in payment of its debts in 1840. And let's see here, the L&O was later purchased and utilized by the Louisville and Frankfort, and let's see, it was subsequently merged into Louisville, Cincinnati, and Lexington Railroad, which I think later on actually merged into the Louisville and Nashville, which it actually did, and then it became a part of CSX today. So that's actually pretty cool. This was one of the first railroads west of the Appalachian Mountains, or really the Allegheny Mountains, or the Allegheny Mountains.
Allegheny.
What?
It's the Allegheny Mountains.
The Allegheny. It's so hard for me to pronounce that. I don't know why. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and letting us look into such interesting stuff about the state of Kentucky, which is just north of us by a little bit. But still, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Avari Mandabratis, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Avari, for that $20 support. And Avari said, anyone going to Dickens on the Strand in Galveston, Texas this weekend, I will be there in my great kilt and top hat. And check out the Strand in Galveston, and I am 2 pictures there in Google Maps.
The Strand in Galveston, Texas. Here is the Strand. There's a cruise ship right here from Carnival. Chaos ensues.
Oh, man, a carnival. It's a carnival.
But let's take a look at the Strand. So here's the Strand. Look at that. Very neat. Turtle. Alleyway. Street. Railroad lines. People. The Strand. Feet. Hopefully no one here is like Harvey Weinstein. But moving on from that, alleyway. Cotton
food.
candy, I think. Taffy.
So.
Dude, that looks nice. I would like to have some of that. Let's see here. Motorcycles. Choppers, specifically. Actually, I don't think those are choppers, Matthew. Am I right?
Those can be considered choppers, I guess you could say.
Choppers.
Cruisers.
Crowds. War tram tracks, or railroad tracks, depending on what their use is. ATV. Old Galveston Square. Conservatorium. Yagas. I don't know what that is.
Sounds like a gang.
Man, we from Yaga's East Clan or something like that. It's like,
And
I don't know.
understand that. I don't know if that's a gang or not. That's just a joke. That's just a joke.
Man, but anyways, British telephone box. Overall, it's a pretty interesting place, the Strand, and I hope that folks go down there and check it out. Also, nice sailing boat there, right, as well. But beyond that, I hope folks go down there and check the place out. It looks pretty cool, and I didn't know that there was such neat stuff around such a major port as Galveston, which is one hell of a major port right here. It's actually a rather sizable one, and there's the battleship Texas right there. And it's temporarily closed, of course, because it's in dry dock. I wonder if they have pictures of it in the dry dock, Matthew. I wonder. Do they have?
I wonder.
Wonder who. But I don't see any pictures of it in the dry dock. But I do see pictures of those quad Beauforts, which is pretty cool. But sadly, no real pictures of the dry dock. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. Thank you so much for the support, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to JRG Projects, who puts in a $10 donation once again, and thank you very much for the second support of the night.
Hey!
And he says, the reason why I ask is, would the U.S. be obligated to aid the president or stay out of it, and taking North Korea out benefits us as much as it benefits Ukraine, and General Douglas MacArthur would and tried?
And I thank you for the support, but the situation is very different now than it was in the past. One, the North Koreans are nuclear armed, pretty much meaning that any offensive action against them is completely impossible due to the threat of nuclear reprisal. Second, they also have a technical defensive ally, which is the Chinese, which are also nuclear armed and nowadays are a pretty serious military power to contend with. Although they're not up to our level, at least regionally, they would be a major issue. So with that in mind, because of the nuclear weapons, we're pretty much barred from really doing anything to them. That's the best way I can explain it. I know a lot of people are going to be like, but we can just destroy their nukes. We really can't. That's a major risk to take. And so for that reason, that's why we really cannot do anything in regards to fighting North Korea or getting the South Koreans to invade North Korea. That's kind of the reason why, is because they're nuclear armed. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to BOFH, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, BOFH, for the support. He said, LSA, and it's always fun listening to you in the background while playing War Thunder, Air Realistic Battles, and bonus points if I get the Kursk or Golan Heights maps, and take a question from the chat.
Hey, and it's good to hear that you're having fun with War Thunder and Air Realistic Battles. I was actually playing War Thunder a little earlier today, but I was playing Ground Realistic Battles at the British on the British tech tree at 7.7. I've been getting really good these days at using the Fox light armored car. Let me show y'all that. The Fox armored car. Let's see here. Here we go. The armored reconnaissance vehicle. I've been using this thing in the game. Tiny, tiny little thing. I mean, it's so small. It has no armor, but it only has 3 crew members and a 30mm gun. And if you use this thing in the game, you are a ballin'. It's not good. Like, it's not good. You have to use it well. But I've been ruining people's days with this thing. I've been wiping out Tiger 2s. I've been taking out T-34s, T-29s in this thing. It's been insane. I've even taken out a lot of Soviet medium and heavy tanks, which is really weird, like, using this thing, because it has, like, no armor pin. It has no armor. The only thing it has going for it is speed, so you just have to use the speed and pray. But beyond that, I've been doing great in this thing today, and it's good to hear that you're having fun. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I was put on, let me see here, I think I was put on the Syria map one time in this thing, so I guess that kind of like was bonus points, I suppose. But I still thank you so much for the support and enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Khan, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Khan, for that support. He said, Bitcoin, question mark. He said, what are your thoughts on this? And I think it is a ripoff, especially when Musk takes over Bitcoin, which seems to be where we're headed. I will say this, Khan, about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a very, very volatile investment, and it is an investment. Me personally, I don't think Bitcoin is necessarily a scam, but it is so volatile that me personally, I would never invest in it, but some people do, and it's just very risky. So if you're looking to invest, stocks are the better way to go, from my personal opinion. But even at that, though, you got to be careful, because if you pick bad stocks, you could go broke anyway. So maybe a mutual fund might be better. But me personally, I'm staying away from Bitcoin. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest, I personally don't like anything involved in crypto. I find most of it to have scammy sorts of tendencies to it. Not to say that they're scams. They're not scams. Like, Bitcoin is not a scam. But it's so volatile, it may as well be a scam. You're pretty much buying into something that could implode the next day or explode the next day with no real explanation at all. With stocks, it's kind of similar, but it's a lot slower, and it actually makes at least very little to no sense. Crypto like Bitcoin is nonsensical, in my opinion, with how it fluctuates and climbs and collapses. And let me go see if I can actually get y'all the current value of the Bitcoin at the moment. Let's see here. Bitcoin. There we go.
We crossed 100K for a little while, and then it's back down to like 98, I think.
So let's see here. So over the past 6 months, let me go see if I can get y'all this. So this is what crypto has been doing. And this is incredibly volatile. This damn looks like the South Sea stock back in the late 1600s through here. How this thing would just collapse and then explode. It literally went from being 30,000 in value in July of 2021 to November of 2021. It was twice its value, and then it imploded. And by the time of October of 2022, it was now half its value that it was in the summer of 2021. That is insane. And what's happening right now is just what happened back then on a far larger scale. This thing is going to implode. Because a lot of people or currently have Bitcoin at the moment are saying or are thinking at the moment, man, this thing can only climb so much higher. I better sell it while it's high. And then you're going to see a whole bunch of people selling this thing, and it's going to freaking implode again and go down to nothing. It's literally gambling at this point. You're just gambling and wanting to feel like you're in the stock market at this point with this thing. Like, I just don't trust it. And it just doesn't look like a good investment to me. Not that anyone should be getting investment advice from me. I don't really invest at all. But I would never invest in this thing. It's just too volatile and too dangerous. There's other things that you could invest in, though, like Raytheon. You know, Raytheon's always a good one. Like, you know, let's take a look at their, well, maybe not a good one today, but, you know, generally, oh, well, maybe not a good one at all. It looks like it's actually, well, you know, actually, when you look at it like that, I mean, it actually is kind of good. But then again, this one also implodes out of the blue. Look at that.
Yeah, it usually implodes when there's like talk of like war ending.
Man, let's see here. So I guess in 2020, that must have been the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And then this right here looks like, I don't even know what the hell this was, because the war in Ukraine was going on strong at that point. And then it's climbed again. And it doesn't really look like it's stopping right now. Let's go look at Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin. Let's see here. Lockheed Martin stock. Let's take a look. Huh. Doesn't really look like anyone's having a good day today. Hell, it doesn't look like Lockheed Martin's having a good time at all. It looks like they're going back down the tubes. Dang, everyone's going down. What the hell's going on in the stock market today, Matthew? Are they, like, falling or something?
Well, I mean, that's not really that big of a drop, really.
Well, it's not a big one, but but everything's going down. Like, the one day I was like, you know what? Y'all ought to get these stocks. And then every single one of them's going down. I'm like, dang. Well, if you lose hope, there's always CSX stock, which is bound to be going down, and it is. Like, it is by 2% in one day. So, man. Whoa. Oh, my goodness. Let's see. Oh.
That's called the toilet.
Well, at least it's climbing in general. I mean, it went from being like 60 cents back in 1984 to, you know, $34 today. So, I mean, I guess that's a decent return, you know? Like, if you look at it over like 40 years, I guess that's not bad. Oh, look, Amazon's going up, and Apple is as well. So I guess that's a good thing, right? You know, like, it's got to be a good thing. Let's see how much they've been going up recently. Oh, wow, they exploded back in 2022, man. Oh, my goodness, they went down the tubes, I tell you. But they've been climbing rapidly recently. Maybe that's a good stock to get in. Or maybe Microsoft. Microsoft's another good one, you know. These are burgeoning groups these days. Lots of money to be made, you know. Lots and lots of money. Loads of money, actually. You know, maybe those are good ones. But anyways, I don't really know a lot about stocks. Don't ever take financial stock advice from me. That's a bad idea. Anyways, with that, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so real quick, I did put up an interesting poll here. I'm not guaranteeing we're going to do any of these, but I was just curious, if we did do an in real life video, if we made one, what video would you like to see the most? I was just curious to see what the responses would be. So 46% said an investigation of UAPs over bases, 28% said driving tanks and military vehicles, and 19% said a tour of an army arsenal or a base. And also 8% said something else, and they were supposed to put it in the chat, but I haven't seen very many ideas coming through the chat, so I'm not sure where the 8% went. But I will say that honestly, out of all those ideas, the one that I was actually thinking about doing was the investigation of UAPs over bases. All these videos keep showing up on Twitter, showing something in the sky over New Jersey, and I was thinking that would be pretty cool to go, like, just go up there, like spend a day there, try to spend the night there as well, and try to get some video of these things if they're even there. Because if allegedly been in the sky for at least 30 days now, every single night except for Thanksgiving, they took the night off that night, and maybe we could get it on camera and try to get to the bottom of it. But that's just an idea. It looks like that's the most popular idea, that is. But I would like to drive a tank too. That'd be pretty neat. But Enforcer, what say you?
I love to know that the aliens also respect federal holidays. They seem to be reasonable and civilized people.
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like maybe the employees went home for work. Maybe it was the off day for the soldiers or something like that.
It was a federal holiday, so they didn't conduct any testing that day, and they told them to go home. That's what it was. Like, you know, that's what it was. Like, we could go up there and get a look around and take some videos and pictures near the Picatinny Arsenal. That'd be kind of cool. I would actually like to do all kinds of cool videos. Like, I always have video ideas behind the scenes. Funnily enough, Matthew shoots down like 80, 90% of them. But one of them, which I thought was really cool, would be a series where it's pretty much just America goes to is at work or something along those lines, or we show different people in different jobs. So we show how air traffic controllers do their jobs, or we follow a pilot along and show what pilot training looks like or something like that, and we are actually involved in the training or actually doing the job, or we show how rail yards work or major ports work. A lot of infrastructure related stuff, and then show what a farmer's life is like. What stockbrokers' lives are like. I thought that would be a really cool kind of a series because it's news well, it's not really news, but it's certainly informative documentaries that I think would be really conducive to a news channel. And then we could do all kinds of cool videos on other stuff where we go around to military installations or bases and show how those work. Well, not really how they work, but at least show what daily life on them's like, or talk to the people who were there. All kinds of stuff. Also, someone said dirty jobs. Now, I'm not talking about dirty jobs kind of stuff. I'm really just talking about like actually showing like cool stuff. Like being at an airport, and like working with like the baggage handlers, and then talking about how many people work as baggage handlers in the country, and how much more difficult their job gets during peak seasons like the holidays, and how it's increasing every year, or something along those lines. I think that would be kind of cool. We could do our own thing. And also I see a lot of people bringing up dirty jobs. I guess that's kind of similar to dirty jobs in a way. We would do
It's
it though.
identical.
It kind of is identical, but at the same time, though, he did dirty jobs. We're not going to be doing dirty jobs. Like that wouldn't be kind of like my forte. I'm not really one to, like try and collect certain reproductive materials from a horse or something like that. That's not really anything I'm looking to do. And that's something that was done on dirty jobs. It's like I'm not really that kind of a person. But we could also do other cool videos, like we could show how Army artillery works, or go, maybe see if we can get on board an aircraft carrier that's underway at sea. That's been done a couple of times on YouTube, but give like a whole different perspective to it on how it works, that kind of stuff. I think that would be neat. Those kind of video ideas would be neat, or following current stories at the time. Like one thing that was cool to me when it happened was the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. I thought that was kind of cool. I was like, that would be cool to go up there and just film it and talk to people around it. But then again, those are kind of topics that you really can't cover well. Those are really more so documentary kind of things that happen months later after all of the information has been compiled and there's been the inquiry and the NTSB has filed their conclusions. Then that's when you kind of make a documentary on it. You really can't make stuff at the moment on that kind of a topic. But I thought that would be cool. But those,
I think the next time something big happens in this country, we should like try to just go cover it as long as it's something generally somewhat related to what we typically cover on the channel. Like if it's something like a major that's happening in the country, that would be cool to like simply fly there, show up, film it, and cover it, and try to get the best footage you can of it, of the event happening, because that's something you really don't see happening anymore unless you're watching like a local station, and even at that, that's not nationally aired most of the time, so you'll hardly ever see it. If we were to go there and film it and cover it and also interview people around the spot where something was happening, like let's say when the bridge collapsed, we could have gone up there immediately and tried to get footage of it and try to interview people and things like that, which would have been like probably like the best thing ever to cover that.
yeah, that would have been really cool. Like, I would love to do that kind of stuff. Like, there's been loads of other things that I like to do. Like, I would really love to do investigative stories. That would be really cool. Those take a lot of time, though. Like, for example, one that I thought would be really neat was the East Palestine railway crash that happened, I believe, in Ohio. And that was a very interesting one because there was a lot of stuff that was being said about it that if you know anything about railroading, it was all really politicized with what happened with that. There was a lot more to it that the NTSB put out that didn't have anything to do with politics at all on either side. And it was just a very interesting kind of a thing. And investigative journalism in that regard would have been very interesting. Maybe we could have gotten interviews with the actual engineers on board the locomotive and talked to them about what speed they were going and such things like that before the case.
Oh.
We could talk.
They wouldn't have said nothing like that. Their lawyers would have told them, nah, no, you can't do that. They'd been like maybe incriminating themselves or something.
Yeah, but we could try and then say that they didn't comment. We could then try and talk to their company representatives at Norfolk Southern, and if they refuse to comment, they refuse to comment. And then we could go to the NTSB, and then we could ask people around what happened. We could talk to the local city government and ask them what's going on in the area, the kind of damage that's going on, that kind of stuff. That would have been a fairly interesting thing to me. And then just leave it as it is. Like we find something out, like the loosening of restrictions on the railroad or the crumbling infrastructure because of a lack of funding, either from the company or the government or something along those lines. That would have been very interesting stuff to me to actually get down to the bottom of and make a really good documentary on. But the problem is that that all takes so much time, and it honestly takes a lot of money too, because you got to stay in hotels, you got to eat, you got to travel around. There's a lot of stuff involved in that really costs a lot of money with that. So budget wise, it becomes really difficult to do that, and it also becomes difficult to find the time if we're wanting to do a daily news show like this every day, because we would have to set up a whole studio and everything everywhere we went, and that would take up most of the day just to do that and then run the show. So that's kind of everything that would come into play, but I would love to do stuff like that. I think it would be incredibly cool. But at the same time, we have this 24-hour news cycle kind of a thing that we have going on right now, and we really cannot interfere with that at all. But anyways, I think it would be cool. Like, I would love to do video ideas like that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
You know what we could do is it could be like, for example, I head out to go cover whatever it is and get the footage and stuff like that, like on the ground at the spot. And that you can stay here at the HQ. If somebody has to keep running the thing, because we can't just take off and like just leave, because that's not possible. We'd be neglecting the stream, videos, and everything else. And then when we return, you could do a voiceover, and we could add in a segment talking about the history of the thing and also some more details about it that you would record right here. That might be an idea.
Man, that's lucky for you because you get to do all the traveling. I'm always stuck here. Like, I'm always just stuck here, like just having
That's
to.
the best part about it.
Kind of.
I get to go.
I guess not great for me though, because I never get to see the world. I'm just stuck here. But still, maybe we'll do that one day though, because that probably would be the best way to do it. It's just that I hate that I never really get to travel, because we always have to keep this show running, and really to keep it running, I've got to be right here where I'm at right now and cannot go anywhere. And so I hope that addresses that fairly well. Also, I see a lot of people coming up with cool ideas like report on this thing. That's another thing that I've seen, because I've really been, I watch loads and loads of videos on YouTube of different kinds of stuff. And there are a lot of channels that go and explore American ghost towns or talk about certain things like incidents that happened, and they'll go to the real life location where it was and kind of explain where everything was as it was back then in the modern day, which is really cool. Because I think that would be really, really neat to do kind of those kinds of videos like that as well. Really, I would like to do any kind of video, because I always find them really cool and interesting, and I think the end result would be pretty neat on our end, and a lot of people really enjoy them. But it's really hard to find the time and the funds to be able to do something like that full time, because with how things work on this channel, we wouldn't really have the income to be able to just go traveling around the country all year round with that kind of expenditure every single day and do that pretty much nonstop. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Esteban Graves, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Esteban Graves, for that support. I don't see a comment attached to it, but of course, that support is what keeps the channel running, and we appreciate it very much. And we also have a $10 super chat from Putin is a crapshoot, who says, I heard that Tucker is interviewing a... also, is this something am I going to get had on this one? Am I going to get had?
Let me see here. Let me go find it. 1 second. Which one is it?
It's the Putin is a crapshoot.
Putin is a crapshoot. Let's see here. I'm not seeing it at the moment. What's the name of the super chat again?
Putin is a shit shoot.
Oh, here we go. Let's see. So he sent in two. I don't know what that means. It has something to do with a form of an animal similar to a horse being in Tijuana. I have no idea what that is, but still, I don't know if we're going to get had or not on that, Matthew, but read that one. I think it'll be okay.
You go ahead then, read it.
Oh, no, please, I insist. Please, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm going to have to pass, because if it's something terrible, I'm not going to be on the hook for it.
Well, you see, I'm going to have to defer to your judgment, Matthew. I believe your judgment is most professional in censoring possible questionable comments, and I just think that there's no one better who could read it than you, my dear enforcer Matt.
You see, I'm really not that educated at all, really. Like, I know nothing.
You know nothing? Dude, I'm stupid. I have to be spoon-fed.
I've got a momentary lapse of moment here. My blood sugar's low. I'm
genetically defective. I simply just sputter spit out every day. Like you have to read it, Matthew. I insist.
I mean, I could, but I might end up talking like this before it's over with. But I can't do it. I can't.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Oh man, I don't know what the hell I'm even saying. Oh man, and I gotta read off a super chat. Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh man, you gotta read it, Matthew. You got to. Oh man.
Man, I'm not.
Me either, man. I'm scared of it, but still, I thank you for the support. Putin is a shit show and helping this channel to keep on running, but we are scared of your super chat. I don't know if there's any reason to be scared or not be, but I'm scared of it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let's see here. Also, by the way, like, thank you for the support. Putin is a crapshoot, but we have to be careful these days because I've read things off in the past that have been almost heinous, almost unconscionable that I've read off before, and it's just terrible. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to Jack Ragnarsson, who puts in a 10 and says, it seems like Russia needs a defeat. Oh, yes, they do. A long-lasting defeat. And do you think there's a possibility of effective negotiations with the current Russian regime, or does Putin need to be ousted first?
I have a feeling that there can be appropriate negotiations with Putin in power. It's just that we're going to have to beat them down to the point they have some humility to get to the negotiating table. Because for some reason, they've been beaten down a lot and they still don't have humility. So we need to beat them down a little bit more and then get them to the negotiating table. I think it can work, even with Putin there right now. Because hoping for a government overthrow usually is like asking for a unicorn, especially in Russia, for it to happen on our terms. Usually it happens on their own internal timetable, pretty much not even caring or concerned about what's going on outside of Russia. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Famaz, who puts in a 10 and says, why is the Washington Post reporting that the German government is in crisis or collapse?
I don't know. I didn't hear that today. Do you know why, Matthew?
I have not heard that either, but I don't really read the Washington Post because I don't find their reporting that all that good. But if they said that, it may be true. I'm not really sure.
Man, hopefully it's not like the Times where they'll just sit there and say something like, China's about to kill the Russians, and it'll be over something like, a Chinese citizen crossed the border today, and he said, thank you, and he didn't say, thank you to our glorious and dear leader, Putin, or something like that, and they're gonna kill him. It's like, something like that. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about the German government collapsing, so I think that might be hype talk, but I don't know enough about it to really talk on it with any kind of experience, so I'd largely have to feign ignorance on that. Well, not really feign ignorance, but declare ignorance on that one. So, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and apparently I do see some people saying that the German government collapsed a few weeks ago. I was wondering if maybe they were mixing the German government up with the French government because they are having a collapse, but maybe there's two collapses going on. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to Angry Drunk Bumblebees, who puts in an 8 and says, everyone knows the mole people don't control the world, the crab people do. Oh.
Yeah, that's true. The crab people do run this thing. You got to remember, it's always those people underground. I don't know why it is that they're underground. I don't know. Maybe it's just colder down there. It's actually hotter underground in the deeper you go. But beyond that, I do thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make it possible. We wouldn't be able to get down to the facts. It is the crab people. And so thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in 5 and says, can we briefly discuss the Battle of 73 Easting and how awesome the Sabo round is? And super chat for second segment, LSL on the way, best community ever.
And thank you so much for the support. And the Battle of 73 Easting was a one of the last tank battles. It was actually the last tank battle in history at this point, and the last major tank battle of the 20th century. It happened in the middle of the Gulf War in 1991 near an area called 73 Easting, where an American armored element came up upon the Iraqi Guard Corps. Well, I believe it was, I think it was just the Iraqi Guard Corps, which was heavily armed and armored, and the United States curb stomped them in an actual legitimate tank battle. It was a pretty wild engagement. The Abrams was already bound to win with any kind of round that it used because the Iraqis were using T-72s, T-55s, and T-62s, which even at the time were still inferior to Western technology. So they were bound to lose. I believe we only lost a single Bradley in that whole engagement. I think 3 Americans were killed, most of them being in that Bradley. So it wasn't really that bad of an engagement. It was we wiped out an entire Iraqi Guard Corps at the loss of one Bradley and unfortunately 3 Americans, but still, that was a whopping victory to have right there. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I just saw JR does stuff saying in the live chat that another YouTuber was jailed by the FSB in Siberia, and he's American and thought it'd be safe to travel across Russia. I don't know who that is. I remember the last, I think Bald and Bankrupt got held up over there in Russia and said some interesting things on a tape. But I think, if I have a feeling, I think I've heard rumblings of this. Is it Sabbatical? Is that the YouTuber that's been jailed? I've heard word that it could have been him, but I'm not really sure. And let me go do a little quick research here, because I'm curious. So let's see here. So yes, it is actually Sabbatical. I just had an interesting hunch that it might have been him, but it looks like he said in a title here 10 hours ago, I was arrested and detained in far eastern Russia. And, you know, he says here in the description, he said, I was warned before going to Russia. Everybody told me not to go, fearing the worst. You'll be locked up for nothing. He said, I wasn't naive, but I seriously never believed Russia would arrest a vlogger and accuse him of being an American spy. Well, I mean, it happened to Bald and Bankrupt, so I mean, that he does admit he was wrong, though, so at least he admitted that, but that was not the smartest thing to do, to go to Russia, because they will arrest you for nothing just to get you, so apparently he found out.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, man, one day, people will actually take the Department of State's travel advisory seriously. That day was not today, but it will be one day. Like, people will actually take it seriously. Like, when the Department of State says, do not go to North Korea at all, and then people go into North Korea, and then you get your brain scrambled. It's like, people one day will take the advisory seriously. Like, when the Department of State tells you not to go somewhere, don't go there. It's stupid to go there. You are going to be in danger. Like, they either hate Americans, or the people in the country hate Americans. It's one or the other. And like, I got to say this, folks. I am 100% for protecting Americans abroad, especially if they're being persecuted wrongfully. But in that case, it's like, why the hell would you go to Russia? Like, I'm not meaning to bash them. But still, you would think that someone would have enough sense. Like, it's not just people saying not to go. The U.S. government says, if you ever look at the travel advisories, not to go if you're an American. I mean, hell, honestly, Tucker Carlson shouldn't be going over there if he was heeding the Department of State's warning. You know, that's the craziest thing. He says that the Department of State wouldn't let him talk to Zelensky, but I'm pretty sure, if we go to the U.S. Department of State's travel advisories, and let me go here, travel advisories. Let's see here. Let's go to the government website. Let's go get our travel advisories. So here we go. So we need to find the Russian Federation, or as they'll call it, Russia. For short. So let me go to the next page. Let's see, where are the R's? We need to find the R's. Well, Romania's right there. I'm not seeing Russia on the list. Let's see.
It might be so obvious they don't even put it on the list. But, you know, honestly, though, like, I will say, like, we don't typically shout out other YouTube channels. I have watched a couple of this guy's videos, this Sabbatical fellow's videos. He actually has good videos. And I think his whole shtick is he goes into places where typically most YouTubers would not dare even step foot into because it's dangerous. The only catch is, though, you are playing basically roulette by doing that. Like, eventually, your luck is going to run out, and you will eventually get arrested, or also something worse happening to you if you go into one of these countries. So I do actually enjoy that guy's videos from what I've seen, like from the couple I've watched. But once again, there's also another YouTuber out there. I think his name is Arab something. It's like, I can't remember the exact name of it. It's Arab. He got held up by barbecue down there in, what was that? What was the country again?
Haiti.
Yeah, in Haiti. And he should have known better than to go to Haiti. So at the same time, like, this guy's not asking for sympathy, by the way. I see here he wrote in his description, he said, I was stupid for going there, and that was my own fault. I chose to go there. The other guy was asking for sympathy. Like, he was out there, like, crying and asking for sympathy and trying to understand why barbecue locked him up. It's like, well, it's pretty obvious why barbecue locked you up. He's a violent warlord. So, you know, don't expect justice from somebody like that. But at least he recognized that he took the risk on his own accord.
But right here, Matthew, on the website, Russia travel advisory, level 4, do not travel. Like, the U.S. government tells you, it's not just random people saying it. The government says, an American citizen, if they ever step foot in this country, is not safe. They will be in such an unsafe position, they better not even travel to this country. They're not going to stop you from getting there. If you get there somehow, you're in there. But they're telling you not to go. It's like they also tell you not to go to Sudan or Syria, which I feel like are pretty good precautions, just to make sure not to go there. They also tell you in other places, like, let's see, Pakistan, to possibly reconsider travel. They don't tell you not to go, they just tell you to reconsider it and maybe think about it a little bit. But it's
What
like,
about North Korea?
oh, North Korea was on the category 4, level 4, do not travel, right up here.
Okay. Well, I see that now. But how come Mexico just says other?
Well, you know, it's complicated. Like, it's complicated. But let's see here. I don't know. It's weird.
So they're not going to say what you should do. It's just like there's not even a category for other. It just says other.
Let's see here. Also, it looks like they've actually divvied up the entirety of Mexico into different areas of do travel, do not travel. Look at that. Like, exercise normal precautions in Yucatan and Campeche. But in these areas, do not travel to Colima, Guerrero, Michoacan, Sinaloa, obviously, for quite obvious reasons, Zacatecas, and Tamaulipas. So you can do not travel to those. There's only 2 places in Mexico which are generally considered very safe, but the rest of them are somewhat unsafe or incredibly unsafe, at least for Americans to travel in. But let's see here. What other states are level 4? Afghanistan is level 4. I wonder why. That must be... Burma is level 4. Really, anywhere that's in an active war is generally a level 4. I believe Ukraine is a level 4.
Belarus is a level 4, actually. That's surprising, actually.
Let's see here. I'm trying to find Ukraine. Yep, Ukraine, level 4. Do not travel. Generally, that one's not because we're an enemy of Ukraine's. It's because they're at war, and so it could be generally unsafe to be in Ukraine because you can end up having a bomb slam down in your building and get killed. So that's generally why it's unsafe. Yemen, crazily enough, level 4. Zambia is level 1. Zambia is incredibly safe. So is the British Virgin Islands. So is Tonga. Argentina is level 1, which isn't shocking. Armenia is weirdly enough level 2. As well as Azerbaijan, which is also very weird. I would not expect that. Let's see. The Central African Republic, for some reason, is level 4. I'm not exactly sure why on that one. I'm sure there's something going on. Burkina Faso is level 4. I don't know why. Let's see here. What is another level 4? Let's go to the page 1, because this is actually kind of interesting. So, obviously Burma. Obviously Afghanistan. Where's another level 4? Belarus is a level 4.
That's kind of surprising. Like, what's their rationale for that? Can you click Belarus and see what that was about?
You'll probably be arrested and claimed being a American spy. So let's see what we got. Do not travel. Let's see. Who require... Due to Belarusian authorities' continued facilitation of Russia's own provoked attack on Ukraine, and given heightened volatility and unpredictable nature of the regional security environment, do not travel to Belarus. Potential harassment targeted specifically at foreigners is also possible. Exercise increased awareness and vigilance regarding political and military tensions in the region. U.S. citizens are advised to avoid public demonstrations. Authorities have used force to disperse demonstrators, including those peacefully demonstrating. Bystanders, including foreign nationals, may face the possibility of arrest or detention. U.S. citizens should regularly reevaluate possible departure plans in the event of emergency, but generally it's because they probably will accuse you of being an American spy.
Interesting. So that's interesting. I haven't really heard of anybody being taken in Belarus as a political prisoner, to my knowledge, but I guess they definitely could.
I'm guessing apparently the Department of State's gotten tipped off enough just to tell people not to go there. I wonder, let's see here. What do they say about Haiti? Do they have a specific mention of barbecue? Pretty much. I mean, kind of. They include robbery, carjackings, certain kinds of assault, and kidnappings for ransom. Kidnapping is widespread, and U.S. citizens have been victims and have been hurt or killed. Kidnappers may plan carefully on target victims at random, unplanned times. Kidnappers will even target and attack convoys. Kidnapping cases often involve ransom requests. Victims' families have paid thousands of dollars to rescue their family members. Let's see, the airport at Port-au-Prince can be a focal point for armed activity. So literally the only way out of Haiti is literally a COD lobby. Armed robberies are common. Like, dude, the list of things in Haiti is insane. It's literally GTA 5. You go in there, it's a literal living GTA 5 lobby down there.
Yeah, I don't know who the hell would like step foot in Haiti. Like the fact that there's still like commercial flights going to Haiti is crazy to me.
Man, it honestly is crazy when you think about it. Well, that's another level 4. I'm wondering why I know what's in South Sudan. Like, I can already tell you all that. Yeah, kidnappings, all that kind of stuff. That would be common because South Sudan is gripped with massive economical issues. But let's see here. Let's go to the
Iran and Iraq are no goes.
let's see. What is North Korea's? Do not travel to North Korea due to the continuing serious risk of arrest and long-term detention of U.S. nationals. Exercise increased caution in North Korea due to the critical threat of wrongful detention. All U.S. passports are invalid for travel to, in, or through the DPRK unless specially validated for such travel under the authority of the Secretary of State. Special validations are granted only in very limited circumstances. More information on how to apply for the special validation is available here. And it appears that the United States tells you we can't do shit if you're arrested in North Korea, so don't go there because that's stupid, which would be obvious. Let's see. Burma is probably for the Civil War. Yeah, civil unrest and armed conflict. That's the Civil War. Afghanistan. What is Afghanistan's? Let's see. Do not travel to Afghanistan due to terrorism, just in general. Risk of wrongful detention. By the way, that's actually a huge problem in Afghanistan because the Islamic Emirate that's now in charge of Afghanistan, which is the Taliban, is actually having acts of terrorism conducted on them by other smaller factions in Afghanistan that are now trying to overthrow them, which were actually fighting with them against the United States when we were there. Crazily enough. Small world we live in, right? But risk of wrongful detention, civil unrest, kidnapping, and crime. And the U.S. Embassy in Kabul suspended operations in 2021. They're not able to provide routine or emergency consular services, obviously. Let's see. What is another level 4? There's Belarus. That we already went over that one. Well, hang on. Actually, we got to move a page or two forward. So there's North Korea. There's Mexico. Lebanon. Libya?
Oh, Lebanon too. Yeah,
Ooh,
both of those.
Yeah, Lebanon and Libya. Let's see. Let's see. The Department of State ordered the departure of non-mission employed EFMs and authorized departure for mission employed EFMs and non-essential USDH employees due to the volatile and unpredictable security situation in Beirut. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut personnel are restricted from personal travel without advance permission. Additional travel restrictions may be imposed on U.S. personnel under the Chief of Mission Security responsibility with little to no notice due to increased security issues or threats. Let's see. And due to the increased volatility following airstrikes within Beirut and volatile and unpredictable security situation throughout Lebanon, the U.S. Embassy urges U.S. citizens to depart Lebanon now while commercial options still remain available. At this time, commercial flights are available, but at reduced capacity. If security situation worsens, commercial options to depart may become unavailable. Please check flight options. The Beirut Rafik Hariri International Airport. That is one hell of a name. Let's see. Do not travel to Lebanon due to crime, terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, unexploded landmines, and the risk of armed conflict. That one's new. Unexploded landmines. Now that's new.
I guess you don't have to worry about the exploded ones.
Yeah, I guess those have already been diffused. It's just the ones that haven't gone off yet. So what is Libya's, though? Because you wouldn't think that Libya would still be on the list, because I would assume they've been on the list for over a decade at this point. Do not travel to Libya due to crime, terrorism, unexploded landmines, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. What armed conflict is going on in Libya at this point? I don't know. Huh.
What do they tell you to do if you want to go there anyway? At the bottom, it tells you what to do if you want to go anyway. They're like, don't go, but if you want to go, here's what you should do.
Carry proof of citizenship, not proof of citizen. Avoid demonstrations, make contingency plans, draft a will. Oh my god, dude, you're serious. You're like, bro, you better get ready to die.
They also said discuss a plan with loved ones regarding the care and custody of pets, children, property belongings, non-liquid assets,
funeral wishes,
etc., etc.
Establish your own personal security plan in coordination with your family, an employer or host organization so that they can monitor your safety and location. Appoint one family member to serve as a point of contact with kidnappers and hostage takers, the media, the United States, and host country government agencies and members of Congress if you are kidnapped, taken hostage, or detained. Consider consulting.
They said also don't forget to follow the Department of State on Facebook and Twitter. They're gonna plug their Twitter page in the midst of trying to tell you how to prepare for battle.
Bro. Man, the Department of State is honestly real. This is like, I respect the Department of State because they do not hold back. They immediately went straight to draft a last living will and testament. It's like, dude, they went straight to the jugular on that one. Consider consulting with a professional security organization. Do not touch unknown metal objects and avoid traveling off well-used roads, tracks, and paths due to risk of unexploded ordnance. Enroll in
Yeah,
the
that sounds like good advice here in America. Even like, don't touch unknown metal objects. It's just good advice for just general living.
Yeah. Let's see. Review the country security report for Libya. Visit the CDC page for the latest travel health information, just in case you got the flu. And U.S. citizens who travel abroad should always have contingency plans for emergency situations. I like, though, that they told you have a last will and testament ready. They were not going to hold back on that one. Did they do the same thing for North Korea? Oh, yeah, they did. Well, no. Actually, draft a will and designate appropriate insurance beneficiaries and or power of attorney. So
make sure those loved ones get that insurance money.
Man, but they tell you, man, if you're going to a level 4, prepare to die. That's literally what they're telling you. They're like, you better be ready to be dead. And honestly, it's pretty appropriate information in most of these places. Mali is a level 4. What for? Oh, really just kidnapping. Yeah, I was thinking it'd have to be kidnapping because that's kind of what they're known for. I think Mali was one of the last countries on Earth to ban slavery, and it was literally in the last decade. So, let's see here. Level 4, Russia, obviously. I wonder what they say. U.S. citizens residing or traveling in Russia should leave immediately. Let's see.
How do you prepare for this one?
Consider the risks involved in having dual U.S. Russian nationality. Have a contingency plan in place that does not rely on U.S. government help. Follow news for important events and update your plans based on new information. Ensure travel.
Well, they don't tell you to create a will for this one. I guess your chances of living are a little higher, but you might get locked up.
Your chances of being tortured are high, but death is low. So it does seem as though we have at least enough of a belief in the Russian Federation to not believe that they would outright kill Americans. But everywhere else, like North Korea, they're like, prepare to die. Get a will already. Like they're just straight up honest with you. I like that, though. And that's why I say y'all need to pay attention if you're ever traveling abroad to the Department of State's advisories. They are honest, brutally honest, and they will tell you what's going on. Somalia is a level 4. I'm not going to even read these. Sudan is a level 4. Syria is a level 4. Who else? Ukraine is a level 4. I bet you that's just because of armed conflict. Let's see. Yeah, it's literally just armed conflict, so don't go there if there's a war on. Let's see here. Who else is a level 4? Venezuela, obviously, is a level 4. Yemen is as well. Let's see. Burkina Faso. I don't know what they're a level 4 for. But I have
a lot of cashews from Burkina Faso.
Really?
Correct.
Are you dying?
I had to take a sip of water.
You went correct. I was like, oh, that's like he's dying.
If you look on the back of a Costco cashew bag, you'll see on the back it says, comes from Burkina Faso and like a whole bunch of other regions as well.
Huh, you know what's interesting, Matthew, right here? Look at this. China has the other as well, like Mexico. Updated to reflect a shift to level 2, exercise increased caution for mainland China. And they have it divvied up. So in Macau, it's level 3. What for? Let's see.
Oh, it's that one region where they're doing the crackdown, like the suspected, really bad activities.
Mm-hmm.
It's that one area.
Yeah, but Hong Kong is at level 2, and so is mainland China, but Macau is at level 3. You would think that Hong Kong and Macau would kind of be bunched up into the same group at level 3, considering that both of them are still going through a pretty decent bit of strife, and they're literally right next door to each other. I mean, Macau is over here, right there, and then this is Hong Kong. They're literally in the same bay. You would think that they'd both be level 3.
You would think so, but I guess they're not.
Yeah, I guess not.
Also,
but
we have 20 super chats to get to, by the way.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, I got so involved in the Department of State's advisories. I was like, that was interesting though. But I do thank you for the support. I hope that addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to none other than Danny B, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Danny B, for that support once again. It's good to see you once again. I was trying not to say once again twice, but I ended up saying it anyway. But thank you very much, Danny. He says, good evening, Enforcers, and sorry, been a crazy night. I'm late, but I'll go back and listen tomorrow in LSA and take one from the chat.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support. And better late than never is what I always say. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the one from the chat is going to go to Davis, who says, what is the possibility that Lebanon intervenes and aids Syria?
Highly unlikely. The Lebanese military practically doesn't exist, and I don't believe that Hezbollah at this point is in any condition to provide military aid or support to the Syrians. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Danny B. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Verna Weeks, who puts in a 7. And thank you very much, Verna, as well for that support. I do not see a comment attached to it, but nonetheless, thank you very much for supporting the channel once again. And we also have a 5 from The Buzzer 1, who says, I just got a new job, and also congratulations. He said, that means I can soon afford to send each word in a separate dono. But to be serious, love you guys, and you all, LFS, or LSA, and keep fighting.
And thank you so much for the support and the kind words. And there is no need to start throwing in each word in an individual super chat. We are greatly appreciative of any support that's given, whether it's a lot or a little. We're always happy for each and every bit of it because no one even has to give it in the first place. But I thank you so much once again for the kind words. And long live the LSA, and the LSA will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to The Buzzer once again, who says, LSA, sorry, I'm drunk and I'm Canadian. Pew pew.
Hey, it's okay. Some people are Canadian. Like, I'm just kidding. Some people are drunk sometimes. It's perfectly fine. And I thank you so much for the support. And I completely understand. I've never personally been drunk, but some have, and I get it. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one also goes to The Buzzer, who puts in a 5. And so speaking of drunk, was that me driving? Oh.
Get this man some car keys. I'm just kidding. Like, I'm just kidding.
No, that's a joke. That's a joke.
That's a prank. That's a prank. It's a prank, bro. It's a prank. But still, thank you for the support. And that was a funny one, though. I'll have to admit. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to By the Power of Ra, who puts in a 5 and says, it seems like the Syrian army and the trucks were fleeing and mistook the armor for friendlies. Fatal error.
I would agree. If that was what happened, a fatal error. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nova, who puts in a 5 and says, could you see Israel taking southern Lebanon and the SRA taking territories in northern Lebanon so Lebanon no longer exists as a nation?
Nah, I don't see that happening because I think a lot of people would actually stop that from happening. At least with the Syrians or the rebels taking any part of Lebanon, I don't really think that will happen, at least in my opinion at the moment. But I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rebel117, once again, who puts in another $20 donation. Thank you very much, Rebel, for the second support of the night. It says, what are your thoughts about Ukraine's armed forces desertion, and why hasn't Zelensky addressed it? And also, if you like trains, how about the Franz Kruckenberg's Shining Zeppelin?
Thank you for the support. I haven't heard of any mass desertions in the Ukrainian army. At all, and there really isn't a lot of places for them to desert to. They just desert straight back into Ukraine, or into Russia, which would be surrendering. But I haven't heard a lot about that at all. But beyond that, we actually did check out the Shinnen Zeppelin last night, which was like the propeller train, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty neat. I still personally have a great place in my heart for the EMD F7. I think it's an incredible vehicle. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5 and says, what happens if the South Korean president doesn't step down and the South Korean federal government asks us for help directly? And will that change anything?
It would not. We would still sit back and say, oh, that's y'all's thing, not ours. They would have to figure out that problem internally. It's a domestic political matter, and that largely remains within the control of the South Koreans to kind of determine their fate in that role. If they vote him out, legally he doesn't even have power as president anymore, so the military will not be following his orders. They would probably follow the orders of the National Assembly in an emergency situation, or they wouldn't follow anyone's orders until a new president was elected. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, and also, Enforcer, some breaking news here. It sounds like the Crimean Bridge has been attacked this morning with sea drones. We just got that word right now. It looks like the Russians are saying no damage is taking place. But of course, you know the Russians lying. Right now, we do not have picture or video evidence of that. But we are hearing preliminary reports that the Crimea Bridge has been attacked. And I'm not sure if this is the big one or not, but it has happened according to reports I'm seeing right now from Telegram. So That is very interesting. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously, because the Russians always lie, and we don't know what the damage truly is. But that's very big news. But Enforcer, what say you?
That is massive news, but we'll be waiting to make more comment once more news comes out. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert McCann, who puts in a 5 and says Tucker can kick rocks.
Perhaps he can. Maybe smaller rocks. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Riley Small, who puts in a 5 and says the intel agencies committed treason when they ignored the president's orders to get out of Syria, and they didn't. And how was he in charge there?
What situation is he talking about, Matthew?
The president's orders to get out of Syria.
And I don't know what time frame that was in, exactly. And
I don't either.
And I don't really think the president ever ordered anyone out of Syria because U.S. forces are still in Syria to this day. And so I'm not really sure when that happened. I don't know. I would have to declare ignorance on that because if it did happen, I do not know anything about it. And if they refused orders, then that was up to the president to really reprimand or punish those in charge of those organizations by removing them and then putting people in charge of either the CIA or other organizations to then have them follow orders. But then that kind of becomes complicated because if the director of the CIA has dirt on the president, he could use that for potential blackmail. And while that isn't legal, the implications could be serious. And so for that reason, the president's hands are kind of tied. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And also, I'm not insinuating whoever this is talking about that they had dirt on them. It's just that usually is the case. Everyone's got dirt. That's something that people, for some reason, don't understand. The president-elect's got dirt. The current president's got dirt. The guy before them had dirt. The guy before that guy had dirt. Everyone's got dirt on them. And the CIA directors generally know how to keep themselves fairly safe, and so they generally make sure to collect dirt. It's kind of an immoral thing when they do it, but they generally collect dirt in some instances, and that makes it a lot harder to remove them because they've got dirt on literally everyone. The incoming guy, the outgoing guy, the guy who's here, literally anyone and everyone. So they largely have job security because they got dirt on everyone that could possibly remove them. And that also allows them to do a lot more of what they would want to do instead of what the president wants. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5 and says, I love that Zelensky takes time every day to talk to the people and the troops and make them feel seen, and it must do wonders for the nation's morale.
I would assume that it probably does. It is really nice of them to do something like that. And I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Riley Small once again, who puts in a 5 and says corn syrup is only used because there are subsidies on corn from when Nixon was president. Sugar cane and beet is cheaper, tastier, and better for you.
Nixon now more than ever. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the support. That's actually a catchy song. But beyond that, I thank you for sharing that. I did not know that. And I would have to say that I have been reading up on President Nixon lately, actually, funnily enough. And I have never read about that. I've been reading about all kinds of things. Never read about the sugar. But nevertheless, I do thank you greatly once again for the support, because when people have to ask, is the enforcer a crook? Well, I'm not a crook. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you for informing us on that. I'll have to look into the sugar industry a lot more and see how it works these days. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA, who puts in a 5 and says one president is a comedian and the other one is a joke. LSA, question to the chat.
All right, I don't know which one that's talking about, so I guess that kind of doesn't break the no politics rule. I do thank you for the support, and let's get one from the chat.
He's talking about Zelensky's a comedian, the other one, Putin, is a joke.
Oh, I thought you were talking about American presidents. I was like, man, that was kind of bold to read that one out. I was like, man, that's crazy. But I would agree. President Zelensky is a real one. Putin's a joke. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew? What do we got for a live chat?
This live chat question goes to Geronimo, who says, how involved do you think Israel is with the rebels in Syria?
Not at all. Probably not a single bit. A lot of people like to say someone's backing them. I don't really think anyone's backing them. I think it's just one of those things that kind of happens. But anyways, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. I would say the Israelis being involved, highly unlikely. But still, with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to It's GXBX, who puts in a 5 and says, I'll be attending an Airsoft Milsim event this weekend in Fort Casavos, aka Fort Hood. And also, I'm 21 and learning geopolitics because of y'all in LSA. And hey, what about that? Finally, like, we rarely ever have viewers in our age bracket, actually. And it's very interesting to hear that. And also, it's good to have you. But Enforcer, what say you?
And it's really good to have you. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and learning some geopolitics because of this channel. And I got to thank you so much for that. I hope you have fun out there on the airsoft range. I've always heard that that's fun. I never personally got to enjoy any of that myself. Maybe one day I will. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, Matthew, can you email me the sheet while we hear a word from Enforcer Matt?
Yes. So let me email the sheet real quick. Let's see here.
While Matthew's emailing the sheet, because unfortunately I don't have quick access to it at the moment, Matthew is actually going to be getting off for the night. It is incredibly late, and the stream is starting to run slightly overtime at this point. And so we want to make sure that Matthew does get an appropriate amount of sleep. I think I'm the one making the... Yeah, I am the one who has to make the video tomorrow if there's one to be made. But nevertheless, sleep is important, and we try and make sure to have as much sleep as I can. Usually I sleep a lot later than Matthew, though, because he's got to tend to other things early on in the morning.
These streams seem to be going overtime quite often these days, but nonetheless, it's been a good stream nonetheless. And of course, marathon streams are always a hell of a thing, by the way. But once again, folks, thank you all for another great stream tonight. I will be hopping off now because I have to get to sleep, because otherwise, past 12:30, I get screwed up the next day and I can't function hardly at all. So with that, folks, thank you all once again for the support. I will see you all tomorrow. And of course, it's not my short war video day, so you'll be hearing from the Enforcer. But with that, of Ukraine. And I'll see you all tomorrow, and good night.
And a good night to Enforcer Matt right there. And with that, we are moving on into our next super chat. But thank you once again. It's GXBX for the support and help of this channel to keep on running. And with that, we have a 5 from Ryan H. And also, sorry everyone, I'm going to have to slow down a little bit because I found out that if I just do this thing back to back without any breathing room, it actually starts wearing out my vocal cords badly. And at the beginning of the stream, when I said, dang, I think I pulled a muscle in my neck, I was going, oh, and then like something in my neck popped. It felt like a muscle like snapped or something like that. And I was like, whoa, we need to back off from exerting the voice too much tonight. So I'm going to be going a little bit slower just to make sure that I don't overexert. And so with that, our next super chat is a 5 from Ryan H. And Ryan H said, why isn't high-speed rail like Japan's Shinkansen and maglev trains become a reality in America? Wouldn't it be more efficient and sustainable? That is a great question. It generally has not become a thing in America because of population density factors. Population density is a very important part to having a thriving and successful major rail hub, and especially supporting the public expenditure on high-speed rail. There's a certain amount of loss that is expected on high-speed rail. High-speed rail never makes money, and from what I understand is not profitable. It is always a government expense that is never going to be a for-profit sort of venture. So with that in mind, when we speak of high-speed rail, we always have to remember that that's kind of the issue. And so we have to know that there's enough public benefit coming out of it to really justify the loss, the income loss, or the tax base. Well, not really the tax base loss, but the tax loss. And so for that reason, we are able to justify it in the northeastern corridor because there's enough population density in this area. But in other areas of the United States, it's a little bit hard to do that. Like in the southeast, because while there is a lot of people living down here, they're not really dense. They're a little bit more sparsely dense. So for that reason, it makes it more difficult to support high-speed rail. But what is actually interesting is if I pull up the Shinkansen, let me go get it right here, and let me go see if I can get the route length here of the Shinkansen. Let's see here. How many miles of rail is this? Yeah. Hang on. Hold up. Let's see here. So from what I can understand, let's see here. So the network in Japan originally started with 320 miles. The high-speed rail network in America, in the United States, is actually about 480 miles long from Washington to Boston. It's actually a pretty long high-speed rail network. It's high-speed by definition, not really in actual practice. It usually gets up to speeds around 120 and 130, which is right at the threshold of being kind of high-speed, but 150 plus is really what's considered high-speed. But the real reason why we don't have it in the rest of America is population density factors. Now, there are clusters that are population dense enough to support high-speed rail service, and quite a lot of it. It's just that there's also a lack of government funding and government ambition as well to really see that kind of come to fruition. However, there has been a bit of a push that's been given from the private sector currently in the form of the Brightline Railroad Company in Florida that is really showing that private railroads are a successful venture and that there is a public desire for transportation like railroads. And so for this reason, we are seeing that there's a little bit more government interest at this point in pursuing higher speed and high-speed rail, and that's why we'll hopefully be seeing that it's brought back to America here in the future. Me, personally, I feel like citizens of the Republic should be given all varieties of transportation to be able to use the airlines, the interstates, and the railroads. I'm not really one for cutting one and growing the other. I'm really for growing them all if possible. And so with that in mind, I would like to see that the interstates and their infrastructure is maintained, and also see the creation of new higher speed 120 mile per hour plus routes, and also high speed 150 mile per hour plus routes throughout areas of the United States where the population density is sufficient enough to be able to support those kinds of activities. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running at Ryan H. I hope that does answer that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from Jack Ragnarsson. And Jack said, also, is it possible for the U.S. and allies to go into Russia and secure their nukes, effectively neutering them, and then go in military and force? Not really so. That would be very difficult, because once they started hearing word that nuclear arsenals were falling to some unknown shadow force, they would start launching them because of the fear of losing them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, Jack Ragnarsson. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew Honeycutt said, and let me make sure to get back to it really quickly, one of the most profound experiences I've had was visiting the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The effect on me can't be understated. And it really is a sombering thing to go to the U.S. Holocaust Museum. I've been there personally, and it was very, very sombering. It's actually right here in this building. It was a building purpose-built, actually, to be that museum. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also what's really cool is that just literally south of the Holocaust Museum is the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. There's actually a lot of cool stuff to check out. Like the USDA is right over here in this building. And let's see, I believe the FDA is nearby as well. But there's a whole bunch of cool stuff around here in this area of Washington, D.C. Honestly, the entire city is full of incredibly interesting government bureaucracies and institutions. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment. And LSA Sergeant Figment said, hit the like button, and that's in order. And hey, that is in order. Hit that like button. We've gotten up to about 2,900 likes, and hopefully we can get even higher than that. And so a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $2 super chat from Gator Nor, who didn't throw in a comment, but the support is greatly appreciated, and we thank you greatly for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 2 from Pleasoth. Pleasoth said, had to wake up early, good night LSA, and happy stream. And thank you so much for the support, Pleasoth, and I hope you had a great night, and thank you for wishing us to have a great stream. We had an incredible one, no doubt. And moving on from that, we also have a 2 from Legend Leo, and Legend Leo said, when the eagles soar, the lion roars, UK, US, and thank you for the support. And that's a really good way of putting the American-British relationship that we've had for hundreds of years to this point. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the last super chat of this segment, and ShayXSXRX said, like the Hawk Tua coin? Yeah, like that. Everyone heard about that whole rug pull thing today. That was a really interesting one. But I still thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does addresses that. I hope that addresses that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the live chat segment. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we will only be able to take a limited number of live chats, so we'll be taking the Morse code decoders and 3 live chat questions, and then rounding out the stream. And so with that, our Morse code decoders for the night is Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, and Arbel Garbo. And Morse code decode for day 1016, Syria's about to lose the war they have been fighting for 12 years in 12 days. Long live the LSA, and ding, 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 ding. That is the sound. That is the sound of money, and y'all get the dead on the nail. I get to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 1016th day of war, because y'all continuously get that correct time and time again, and it truly is amazing. And so with that, I hope that addresses that incredibly well, and we are on to the third to last question of the night, which is Big Daddy Jackal. And Big Daddy Jackal said, do you think there's any possibility of Ukraine getting at 802 air tractors, and how effective do you think they would be? I haven't personally not really heard of the air tractor. Let me go see if I can find them really quickly. Let's see here. Let me go see if I can find them. Ah, yeah, the crop dusters. Well, the modified crop dusters. So, the Super Tucanos, I think is what you're kind of talking about, or something similar. I haven't heard about that. I think that they really would not be viable in a contested airspace like Ukraine, though, being entirely honest. And so I hope that does address that well. And with the second to last question tonight, we have Peace with War. And Peace with War said, this SSG is cleaning up the areas they take over. Is this a publicity stunt, or did they actually care for the people? Most likely a publicity stunt for propaganda reasons, so that way the civil populations that they're about to be taking over will not be as opposing their new administration as they could be. That most likely is the case, because from what we understand, they're not really that great of a group, at least ideologically. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night, and the lucky last person that threw in the lucky last question of the night was Jigglesworth. And Jigglesworth said, with the economic collapse of France yesterday, the political collapse of France yesterday, what does that mean for the French support for the Ukraine conflict and helping to train Ukrainian troops? Largely, that is all in the confines of the president, because while the National Assembly collapsed, the office of the president is still 100% intact, and that's largely all that mattered even before the National Assembly collapsed. So the reality of the matter is that it will not really have any impact, and French support to Ukraine will continue at the same levels it has been historically for the foreseeable future. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching this news tonight. We had 9,000 people here at the peak, and 56,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. We are entirely honored and appreciative to have each and every single one of y'all here tonight, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards